In the dead of night, a cryptic letter arrives at 221B Baker Street, its ink bleeding secrets. It speaks of a vault in a crumbling London manor, where whispers eerie, impossible whispers echo at midnight, pleading for release. Why does this vault, sealed for decades, call out with a woman's voice? What did Evelyn Ashburn, a vanished heiress, hide within its walls? A treasure, a curse, or a truth so dangerous it could shatter minds? Sherlock Holmes, with Dr. Watson at his side, steps into a labyrinth of coded journals, hidden keys, and a secret society's betrayal. As they unravel a conspiracy tied to a revolutionary sonic device, each clue pulls them deeper into a web of deception where every whisper could be their last. Will Holmes outwit the shadows chasing Evelyn's legacy, or will the vault's secrets claim them both? Chapter 1. The enigmatic invitation. The fog clung to Baker Street like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of who's and the cries of newsboys hawking their wares. Inside 221B, the air was thick with the scent of pipe smoke and the faint tang of chemicals from Sherlock Holmes's latest experiment. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire, scribbling notes for a chronicle of our recent case involving a stolen sapphire, when a sharp rap at the door broke the morning's quiet. Mrs. Hudson, our steadfast landlady, entered with a silver tray bearing a single envelope. "For Mr. Holmes," she said, her brow creased with curiosity. "Delivered by a boy who wouldn't give his name. Said it was urgent." She lingered a moment, hoping for a glimpse of the mystery, but Holmes waved her off with a distracted flick of his hand. He took the envelope, its heavy cream paper sealed with a crimson wax stamp bearing an unfamiliar crest, a coiled serpent entwined with a quill. Holmes's eyes narrowed as he broke the seal, his long fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. "Curious," he murmured, unfolding the letter. "Very curious indeed." I leaned forward, my notebook forgotten. "What is it, Holmes?" He read aloud, his voice crisp and deliberate. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, your reputation as a man of unparalleled deduction precedes you. I beseech your aid in a matter most peculiar, one that defies reason and chills the soul. At Ashburn Manor, in the heart of London's shadowed outskirts, there lies a vault from which strange whispers emanate, heard only in the dead of night. The servants speak of a curse, the townsfolk of madness. I implore you to uncover the truth behind these murmurs before they drive us all to ruin. Come at your earliest convenience, but beware, the vault guards its secrets jealously. Yours in desperation, Lord Percival Ashburn." Holmes set the letter down, his gaze distant as if already dissecting the words in his mind. "Ashburn Manor," he said softly. "A name I've not heard in some time. The family is old, Watson, steeped in wealth and tragedy. Lord Percival is the last of their line, a recluse by all accounts. This talk of whispers and curses is most intriguing. A case, then?" I asked, my pulse quickening at the prospect. Life with Holmes was never dull, and the hint of the supernatural, though I knew he'd scoff at it, stirred my imagination. "Indeed," he replied, springing to his feet. "Pack your bag, Watson. We shall depart within the hour. A vault that whispers is not a thing to be ignored." The journey to Ashburn Manor took us through London's labyrinthine streets, past gaslit alleys and into the quieter, mist-shrouded outskirts where the city seemed to hold its breath. Our hansom cab rattled along a cobbled lane, flanked by skeletal trees that clawed at the sky. The manor loomed ahead, a Gothic pile of weathered stone and ivy, its towers piercing the fog like sentinels. Its windows glowed faintly, as if reluctant to reveal the secrets within. A butler, gaunt and pale as a spectre, greeted us at the door. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice a dry whisper. "I am Grayson. His lordship awaits you in the drawing-room." His eyes darted nervously, and I noticed his hands trembled as he took our coats. The drawing-room was a cavern of faded grandeur, crimson drapes heavy with dust, portraits of stern-faced Ashburns staring down from the walls, and a fire that did little to warm the chill. Lord Percival Ashbourne stood by the hearth, a tall man in his 60s, his silver hair framing a face etched with worry. His eyes, sharp and blue, betrayed a mind still keen despite his evident agitation. "Mr. Holmes," he said, extending a hand, "I am grateful you've come. I fear I am at my wit's end." Holmes settled into a chair, his fingers steepled. "Tell me everything, Lord Ashburn. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem." Lord Ashburn paced as he spoke, his words tumbling out in a rush. "The vault lies beneath the manor, built by my great-grandfather, Sir Reginald Ashburn, a man obsessed with secrecy. It is said he locked away something of great value, none know what, for he died without revealing it. For generations, the vault has been a family legend, but recently—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Recently, the servants have heard whispers from within, always at midnight. They speak of voices not human, pleading or warning. 2 maids have fled, claiming the manor is cursed. I myself have heard them, Mr. Holmes' faint, disjointed words, like a chorus of ghosts." Holmes's expression remained impassive, but I could see the spark in his eyes, the thrill of a puzzle. "And the vault itself?" he asked. "Have you attempted to open it?" Ashburn shook his head. "It is sealed with a lock unlike any I've seen, intricate, almost mechanical. No key in the manor fits it, and I dare not force it open. The whispers, they feel alive, as if something within watches us." I shivered, though the fire crackled nearby. Holmes, however, leaned forward. "Describe the whispers precisely." "Their tone, their words, if any are discernible." Ashburn frowned, his hands clasped tightly. "They are soft, like wind through a keyhole, but urgent. I caught fragments. Free me, beware, the truth. It's madness, I know, but I cannot dismiss it." Holmes nodded, rising. "We shall stay the night, Lord Ashburn, and investigate this vault ourselves. I trust you have no objection." "None at all," Ashburn replied, relief flooding his face. "Grayson will prepare rooms for you." The manor at night was a different beast. The corridors seemed to twist and stretch, shadows pooling in corners like ink. Grayson led us to our rooms, his candle casting flickering light on walls adorned with tapestries of mythic beasts. My room was comfortable but cold, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. I unpacked my revolver, a habit born of 2 many adventures with Holmes, and settled uneasily into bed. Sleep eluded me, my mind replaying Ashburn's tale. Whispers from a vault? It sounded like a ghost story, yet Holmes's interest suggested there was more to it. He had a knack for finding the rational thread in the most fantastical tapestry. At 11:30, a knock roused me. Holmes stood in the doorway, fully dressed, his eyes alight with purpose. Come, Watson, midnight approaches. Let us meet these whispers. We descended to the manor's lower levels, guided by Grayson, who carried a lantern with shaking hands. The air grew colder as we navigated a spiral staircase, its steps worn smooth by centuries of use. At its base was a heavy iron door, its surface etched with the same serpent and quill crest from the letter. Beyond it lay the vault, a massive slab of steel set into the stone wall, its lock a marvel of gears and dials, gleaming faintly in the lantern's glow. Holmes examined the lock, his fingers tracing its contours. "Remarkable," he muttered. "A combination mechanism likely requiring a sequence of turns. No keyhole, no obvious point of entry. A work of genius." Grayson shifted uncomfortably. "The whispers, sir. They'll start soon." Holmes glanced at his pocket watch. 2 minutes to midnight. "We shall see." We waited in silence, the only sound the faint drip of water somewhere in the darkness. As the watch's hands aligned at 12, a low hum filled the air, like the vibration of a tuning fork. Then came the whisper, soft, overlapping, as if a dozen voices spoke at once. They seemed to emanate from the vault itself, curling around us like mist. "Free. Me." The words were faint but clear, tinged with desperation. "Beware the truth." I gripped my revolver, my heart pounding. Holmes, however, was still, his head tilted as if listening to a symphony. The whispers faded after a minute, leaving only the echo of our breathing. "Fascinating," Holmes said, his voice calm. "Not a curse, Watson, but a phenomenon. An acoustic effect, perhaps, or something more deliberate. The vault is no mere strongbox. It is a puzzle, and I intend to solve it." Grayson stared at him, wide-eyed. "You're not afraid, sir?" Holmes smiled thinly. "Fear is the enemy of reason, Grayson. I deal in facts, and the facts here are most compelling." We returned to our rooms, but I knew sleep would not come easily. Holmes, I suspected, would spend the night pacing, his mind already unraveling the threads of this enigma. As I lay in the dark, the whispers lingered in my ears, not as a curse, but as a challenge, one Sherlock Holmes would not resist. The manor held its secrets tightly, but I had no doubt Holmes would pry them loose one deduction at a time. The next morning, over a breakfast of cold ham and strong tea, Holmes was already at work. He spread a map of the manor across the dining table, its edges curling like ancient parchment. "Ashburn Manor is a labyrinth, Watson," he said, tapping the map. Built in the 17th century, expanded in the 18th, and riddled with peculiarities. The vault is but one piece of a larger design. I peered at the map, its lines a tangle of corridors and chambers. "What do you make of the whispers, Holmes? A trick?" "Possibly," he replied, his eyes scanning the map, "but not a simple one. The vault's construction suggests intent, perhaps a mechanism to amplify sound or to conceal something. Within, the words we heard, 'Free me,' 'Beware,' 'the truth,' are too specific to be random. They point to a purpose." Lord Ashburn joined us, looking haggard. "Did you hear them?" he asked, his voice low. "We did," Holmes said. "And I am more convinced than ever that your vault is no mere repository. Tell me, Lord Ashburn, what do you know of your great-grandfather, Sir Reginald?" Ashburn frowned, stirring his tea. "He was a brilliant man, but eccentric. An inventor, a collector of rare artifacts. Some called him mad, obsessed with protecting his legacy. The vault was his creation, built to safeguard something he valued above all else. But what? I cannot say. Holmes nodded, his mind clearly racing. Then we shall start with Sir Reginald. His journals, his possessions, somewhere in this manor lies a clue to the vault's purpose. Watson, we shall begin in the library. Grayson, summon the staff. I wish to question them. Grayson bowed and hurried off, while Holmes led me to the library, a vast room lined with shelves that groaned under the weight of leather-bound tomes. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through tall windows, and the air smelled of old paper and wax. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the shelves for anything out of place. Sir Reginald was no ordinary man, Holmes said, pulling down a volume on cryptography. A mind that builds a vault like that thinks in lairs codes, riddles, misdirection. We must think as he did. I took a different shelf, flipping through books on history and science, but my thoughts kept drifting to the whispers. Holmes, I said, what if the vault is dangerous? Those words, beware, they could be a warning. He glanced at me, a faint smile on his lips. Danger, Watson, is often the shadow cast by truth. We shall find it, whatever it may be. The morning passed in a blur of pages and questions. The servants, nervous but cooperative, spoke of strange occurrences, lights flickering, footsteps in empty halls, and always the whispers at midnight. One young maid, Clara, mentioned a locked room in the east wing, untouched since Sir Reginald's time. Holmes's eyes lit up at this, and he insisted we investigate at once. The east wing was a forgotten corner of the manor, its corridors thick with cobwebs. The locked room was behind a heavy oak door, its handle tarnished but sturdy. Holmes produced a set of lockpicks from his pocket, and after a few deft movements, the door creaked open. Inside was a study frozen in time maps pinned to the walls, a desk cluttered with papers, and a portrait of a stern man with piercing eyes, unmistakably Sir Reginald. Holmes rifled through the desk, uncovering a leather-bound journal filled with diagrams and cryptic notes. This, he said, holding it up, is our first real clue. The journal's pages were a maze of symbols and sketches, some depicting the vault's lock, others hinting at a hidden mechanism beneath the manor. One entry stood out, written in a hurried hand. The serpent guards the truth, but only the worthy may pass. 3 keys, 3 truths, 1 voice. Holmes closed the journal, his expression one of fierce determination. Watson, this is no mere vault. It is a test, a challenge left by Sir Reginald. We have work to do. As we left the study, the manor seemed to watch us, its shadows deeper, its silence heavier. The whispers were only the beginning, and I knew Holmes would not rest until he had unveiled every secret Ashbourne Manor held. For now we had a journal, a riddle, and a vault that spoke in the night, a puzzle worthy of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Ashbourne Legacy. The fog clung to London streets like a shroud as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stepped out of their hansom cab, its wheels clattering to a halt before the looming silhouette of Ashbourne Manor. The manor's Gothic spires pierced the mist, and its weathered stone facade seemed to sag under the weight of centuries. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a fitting prelude to the mystery that had drawn them. Here, Holmes's sharp eyes scanned the manor's exterior, noting the cracked windows and ivy-choked walls, while Watson adjusted his coat against the evening chill, his breath visible in the dim glow of the gas lamps, an imposing relic, Holmes remarked, his voice low but carrying that familiar edge of curiosity. The architecture suggests late 17th century with later additions. Notice the asymmetry, hasty expansions, likely to conceal something. His gloved hand gestured toward a mismatched wing, its stonework newer but poorly integrated. This place has secrets, Watson. Let us see what they whisper. Watson nodded, though his expression betrayed unease. The cryptic letter they'd received at 221 B. Baker Street had been explicit in its urgency, yet vague in detail, a plea from Lord Ashburn's butler, Mr. Harrow, claiming strange whispers emanated from a vault within the manor, audible only. At midnight. The letter hinted at a family curse, a notion Holmes dismissed with a scoff, but which Watson, ever the romantic, found unsettling. They had agreed to investigate, arriving under the pretense of a social call to avoid arousing suspicion. Manor's iron gates creaked as they pushed through, the gravel path crunching underfoot. At the entrance, a heavy oak door groaned open, revealing Harrow, a gaunt man with deep-set eyes and a nervous twitch. His black suit was immaculate, but his hands trembled as he ushered them inside. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, thank you for coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "His lordship is indisposed, but he's grateful for your discretion. The disturbances have grown worse." "Disturbances?" Holmes's tone was sharp, his eyes narrowing as he studied Harrow's pallor. "Describe them precisely, if you please." Harrow hesitated, glancing toward the shadowed staircase that dominated the grand foyer. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. "It's the vault, sir," he said at last. "Deep in the west wing, sealed for decades. At midnight we hear voices, whispers like a chorus of the dead. They speak no clear words, but they beg, sir. They beg for release." Watson shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing the revolver in his coat pocket. "And Lord Ashburn, what does he make of this?" "His lordship believes it's the curse," Harrow replied, his voice dropping further. "The Ashburn family has long been plagued by misfortune. The vault, they say, holds something unnatural. I've served here 20 years, and I've heard tales of Evelyn Ashburn, the lost heir, vanishing after tampering with forces she shouldn't have." Holmes's lips curled into a faint smile, though his eyes remained cold. "Curses are the refuge of the unimaginative, Mr. Harrow. I deal in facts. Show us this vault." Harrow led them through the manor's labyrinthine corridors, their footsteps echoing off marble floors and paneled walls adorned with faded portraits. The eyes of long-dead Ashbournes seemed to follow them, their painted gazes heavy with judgment. Watson noted the opulence, chandeliers draped in cobwebs, tapestries frayed at the edges, but also the neglect. Dust coated every surface, and the air grew colder as they descended a narrow staircase into the west wing. The vault's door was a slab of iron, etched with intricate symbols that seemed to writhe in the flickering light of Harrow's lantern. Holmes knelt, examining the lock, a complex mechanism with no visible keyhole. "Remarkable," he murmured, his fingers tracing the symbols. "These are not mere decoration. They resemble alchemical sigils, though altered. Watson, your thoughts?" Watson peered over his shoulder, frowning. "They look like something out of an old grimoire. Occult, perhaps, but I'm no expert. Could they be decorative? Decorative?" Holmes's tone was almost mocking. "Nothing in this manner is without purpose. These symbols are a cipher, A warning or both. He stood, brushing dust from his knees. We shall return at midnight to hear these whispers for ourselves. In the meantime, Mr. Harrow, tell me everything you know about Evelyn Ashburn. Harrow's face paled further. If that were possible. She was Lord Ashbourne's aunt, vanished in 1845. A brilliant woman, they say, but reckless. She dabbled in things, artifacts, societies that respectable folk avoided. The family claimed she ran off with a lover, but others say she was locked in the vault, cursed for her meddling. Holmes's eyes gleamed. And the artifact? A relic, sir. No one knows what it was, only that it was priceless and dangerous. Locked in the vault after her disappearance, never seen again. As Harrow spoke, Holmes paced the corridor, his mind already racing. Watson, sensing his friend's intensity, suggested they explore the manor further. Harrow offered to prepare rooms for the night, and they agreed, intending to stay until the whispers could be investigated. Left alone, Holmes led Watson to the manor's library, a cavernous room lined with shelves that stretched to the vaulted ceiling. The air smelled of leather and mildew, and a massive fireplace stood cold at one end. Evelyn Ashburn, Holmes mused, scanning the shelves. A woman of intellect, yet shrouded in scandal. If she left a trail, it will be here. He moved, with purpose, pulling books at random, his fingers deftly flipping through pages. Watson, less methodically, browsed a nearby table where he found a stack of old newspapers. One headline caught his eye. Ashburn heir missing, family curse suspected. Look at this. Holmes, Watson said, holding up the yellowed paper. From 1845. It mentions Evelyn's disappearance after a public dispute with her father over a forbidden relic. The family claimed she fled to the continent, but locals swore she never left the manor. Holmes took the paper, his eyes scanning it rapidly. Fascinating. The article is vague, but the timing suggests a cover-up. A public dispute would have drawn attention, yet the family silenced it quickly. Why? He handed the paper back and resumed his search, his movements almost frenetic. After several minutes, he paused at a shelf near the fireplace, his fingers brushing a leather-bound volume that seemed out of place. Its spine was unmarked, its edges worn. He pulled it down, revealing a journal, its pages filled with tight, elegant handwriting. Evelyn's, Holmes said, his voice tinged with triumph. He opened it, revealing not only text, but intricate sketches of symbols matching those on the vault door. The writing was in code, a substitution cipher, Holmes noted with a glance. A woman of secrets indeed. This will take time to decipher, but it's a start. Watson leaned closer, peering at the cryptic text. What does it say? Not yet, Watson. The code is complex, but I suspect it holds the key to the vault literally and figuratively. Holmes tucked the journal under his arm. We need more information. The groundskeeper Harrow mentioned his knowledge of the estate could be useful. They left the library, navigating the manor's twisting halls until they reached the servants' quarters. The groundskeeper, a weathered man named Thomas, was polishing tools in a small shed behind the manor. His face was lined with years of labor, but his eyes were sharp, and he greeted Watson warmly, sensing a kindred spirit in the doctor's straightforward demeanor. You're the detective, then? Thomas said, eyeing Holmes warily. Heard you're poking into the vault business. Be careful, sir. This place ain't right. Holmes raised an eyebrow. Explain. Thomas set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag. The manor's got secrets older than any of us. Tunnels, they say, running beneath the estate, used in the old days for smuggling or worse. Evelyn Ashburn knew 'em well. Folks say she hid something down there before she vanished, something the family didn't want found. Tunnels? Holmes's interest sharpened. Where are the entrances? Thomas shrugged. Sealed, most like. But I've seen odd things, shadows moving where they shouldn't, noises from below. Check the old stables, maybe. They're half ruined, but there's a trapdoor under the hay, or so I heard. Holmes nodded, committing the information to memory. Watson, sensing the groundskeeper's unease, pressed further. And Evelyn? What do you know of her? She was kind, Thomas said, his voice softening. Not like the rest of them. Always talking about science, progress. But she got mixed up with strange folk of society, they called it. Met in secret, wore masks. After she disappeared, the manner changed. Got darker, like it was mourning her. Holmes's eyes narrowed. A society? Did they have a name? Thomas shook his head. Never heard one. But they left mark symbols, like on the vault door. You'll see 'em if you know where to look. Thanking Thomas, Holmes and Watson returned to the manor, the groundskeeper's words lingering. Like the fog outside. The mention of a secret society intrigued Holmes, suggesting a broader conspiracy. Back in their rooms, Holmes sat by a flickering candle, the journal open before him. His fingers traced the coded text, his mind working through the cipher's patterns. Watson, meanwhile, reviewed the newspaper article, jotting notes in his pocketbook. By late evening, Holmes had made progress. The cipher is a variant of Visionaire, he announced, his voice calm but triumphant. The key is Ashburn. Evelyn was clever, but not infallible. He scribbled a translation, revealing the journal's first entry. The vault is more than a lock. It guards the heart of our work. The first key lies where time stands still. Watson frowned. Where time stands still. That's vague. A riddle, Holmes said, his eyes gleaming. Evelyn loved games. The manor is full of clocks, but one must be significant. We'll search tomorrow. He closed the journal, his mind already mapping the manor's layout. For now, we wait for midnight. As the clock struck 12, they returned to the vault, joined by a reluctant Harrow. The corridor was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Then, faintly at first, the whispers began. They were low, almost melodic, a cascade of disjointed syllables that seemed to rise from the vault itself. Watson shivered, his hand on his revolver, while Holmes stood motionless, his head tilted to catch every nuance. Help, free, betrayed. The words were faint, overlapping, as if spoken by multiple voices. Holmes pressed his ear to the vault door, his face a mask of concentration. Fascinating, he murmured. Not supernatural, Watson. An acoustic phenomenon, perhaps amplified by the vault's design, but the words, they suggest intent. The whispers faded as quickly as they began, leaving the corridor silent once more. Harrow crossed himself, muttering about curses, but Holmes ignored him, his mind racing. Evelyn's journal will guide us, he said, turning to Watson. Tomorrow we find the first key. This manor is a puzzle, and I intend to solve it. As they retired for the night, Holmes's thoughts churned. The vault, The whispers, the secret society, all pointed to a truth buried in the Ashburn legacy. Evelyn's disappearance was no mere scandal. It was a deliberate act, perhaps to protect or conceal something extraordinary. The journal's riddle was their first clue, and Holmes felt the familiar thrill of the chase. Whatever secrets the manor held, he would uncover them, piece by meticulous piece. The night deepened, and the manor seemed to settle around them, its shadows lengthening. Watson, lying awake, couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Holmes, however, slept lightly, his mind already turning to the riddle, where time stands still. The answer was close, hidden in plain sight, and he would find it. The game, as he often said, was afoot. The next morning, Holmes was up before dawn, his energy palpable. Watson found him in the dining hall, examining a massive grandfather clock that dominated one wall. Its hands were frozen at midnight, the pendulum still. "This is it," Holmes said, his voice low but certain. "The journal's riddle, where time stands still. This clock hasn't moved in years." He ran his fingers along the clock's ornate frame, searching for hidden mechanisms. Watson watched, marveling at his friend's focus. After several minutes, Holmes pressed a carved rosette, and a soft click echoed through the hall. A panel slid open, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a brass key, its surface etched with the same occult symbols as the vault door. Holmes held it up, the metal glinting in the morning light. "The first key," he said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "But it won't be enough. The journal suggests more are needed, and the vault's mechanism is unlike any I've seen." Watson took the key, examining it closely. "It's heavy. And these symbols, do they mean something?" "They do," Holmes replied. "They're a blend of alchemical and Masonic iconography, likely tied to Evelyn's society. But their precise meaning eludes me for now. We need the others." There. Search was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the dining hall window, they saw a figure darting across the grounds, a man in a dark cloak, moving with purpose. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Watson, your revolver, quickly." They gave chase, the fog swallowing the figure's outline. As they pursued him through the manor's overgrown gardens, the man was swift, vanishing into a copse of trees near the estate's edge. Holmes knelt, examining the ground. "Fresh footprints," he said, pointing to deep impressions in the mud. "He's no amateur. Notice the stride, deliberate, trained, and this." He plucked a torn scrap of paper from a bramble, its edge marked with coordinates 51.5074 N, 0.1278 London, Holmes said, his voice sharp. "These coordinates point to a crypt near St. Paul's. Our prowler is connected to the vault, and he's not alone." Watson gripped his revolver tighter. "What's in the crypt?" Holmes's smile was grim. "Answers, Watson. And perhaps danger. We'll find out tonight." They returned to the manor, the key and coordinates burning in Holmes's mind. The Ashburn legacy was unraveling, revealing threads of conspiracy and betrayal. Evelyn's journal, the vault's whispers, the secret society, all were pieces of a larger puzzle. As they prepared for their nighttime excursion, Holmes felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The manor was alive with secrets, and he was determined to drag them into the light. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Holmes pored over the journal, deciphering more entries that hinted at Evelyn's work with the society, a group obsessed with unlocking hidden knowledge. perhaps at great cost. Watson, meanwhile, spoke with the manor's staff, piecing together fragments of Evelyn's life. A maid recalled her fascination with sound, her experiments with vibrations that couldn't move the soul. Another servant mentioned a lover, a man shunned by the family, who vanished with her dot by evening. Holmes had decoded another passage. The second key rests where the dead keep watch. The coordinates aligned with this clue, pointing to the crypt as their next destination. Armed with lanterns, revolvers, and the brass key, they set out under cover of darkness, the fog thicker than ever. The manor loomed behind them, its windows like empty eyes, watching their departure. The crypt was an hour's ride from the manor, nestled in a forgotten corner of a churchyard near St. Paul's. Its entrance was guarded by weathered gargoyles, their stone faces eroded by time. Holmes examined the door, finding a lock that matched the brass key's design. But as he inserted it, the mechanism resisted. "A decoy," he muttered. "The key fits, but the lock requires more. Clever." Watson scanned the churchyard, his nerves on edge. "Holmes, we're exposed here. If someone's watching." His words were cut short by a rustle in the shadows. Holmes's hand shot up, silencing him. They crouched behind a gravestone, watching as three figures emerged from the fog mast, cloaked and armed. Holmes's mind raced, calculating their odds. "Stay low," he whispered. "We need the second key, and they may lead us to it." The figures approached the crypt, their movements silent but deliberate. One produced a key, identical to Holmes's, and inserted it into a hidden slot beneath a gargoyle. A low rumble echoed as a section of the crypt wall slid open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The game deepens, Watson. Follow, but quietly." They trailed the figures, keeping to the shadows. The staircase led to a subterranean chamber, its walls adorned with murals depicting robed figures around a glowing vault. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of earth and decay. At the chamber's center stood a stone pedestal, its surface carved with a mechanical puzzle, a series of rotating dials etched with symbols. Holmes studied the puzzle, his mind racing. "The symbols match the keys," he whispered. "This is the lock for the second key." He worked quickly, aligning the dials based on the journal's cipher. A click sounded, and a compartment opened, revealing another brass key, its symbols glowing faintly in the lantern light. Before they could retrieve it, the masked figures turned, spotting them. "Intruders!" one shouted, drawing a blade. Holmes reacted instantly, knocking over a lantern to create a distraction. In the chaos, he grabbed the key, and they fled up the stairs, the figures in pursuit. Watson fired a warning shot, slowing their pursuers, and they emerged into the churchyard, the fog swallowing them as they ran. Back at the manor, breathless but unharmed, Holmes examined the second key. "Two down," he said, his voice steady. "Despite the adrenaline, one remains." "But these men, who are they protecting? And why?" Watson, panting, shook his head. "They're organized, Holmes. This isn't just about a vault. It's something bigger." "Indeed," Holmes replied, his eyes distant. "Evelyn Ashburn stumbled onto something dangerous, a secret worth killing for. We're close, Watson. Tomorrow we find the third key and end this." As they settled into their rooms, the manor's silence felt oppressive, its shadows hiding. Unseen watchers. Holmes sat by the window, the keys and journal before him, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. The Ashburn legacy was a tapestry of betrayal, innovation, and hidden truths, and he was unraveling it thread by thread. The whispers of the vault called to him, promising answers, and he would not rest until they were his. Chapter 3. The Key in the Clock. The storm rolled in with the subtlety of a charging bull, its first growls echoing across the Ashburn estate as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood in the cavernous dining hall of the manor. Rain lashed against the tall, arched windows, each pane rattling as if protesting the secrets held within the ancient walls. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax, the chandelier above casting a dim flickering glow over the long oak table that dominated the room. Holmes's sharp eyes darted from the ornate ceiling to the heavy drapes, every detail of the manor a potential clue in the enigma of the whispering vault. The journal they'd found in the library lay open on the table, its brittle pages yellowed and curling at the edges. The cryptic riddle within had consumed Holmes since dawn, its words etched into his mind. Time guards the first, where seconds dance and hours hide. Seek the heart that ticks and claim what lies inside. He paced slowly, his lean figure a shadow in the candlelight, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Watson, seated with a cup of tepid tea, watched his friend with a mix of admiration and exasperation. "Holmes," Watson said, breaking the silence, "you've read that riddle a dozen times. Surely it's not that complex. A clock isn't it? It's got to be a clock." Holmes paused, one eyebrow arching. "Astute, Watson, but incomplete. The riddle specifies the heart that ticks, not merely any clock. This manor is littered with timepieces 6 in this room alone. The question is which one holds the key." His gaze swept the hall, landing on an antique grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum swinging with a steady, hypnotic rhythm. "And why a key at all?" "The vault's whispers suggest a mechanism beyond mere locks. We must proceed with precision." Watson sighed, setting his cup down. "Precision, yes, but we've been at this for hours. The butler's already nervous. Enough. Thinking we'll tear the place apart. And that storm," he gestured toward the window as a bolt of lightning illuminated the room, casting jagged shadows. "We're not going anywhere tonight." "Excellent," Holmes replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "A storm is a perfect ally. It keeps interlopers at bay and forces us to focus. Now, let us examine this clock." He strode toward the grandfather clock, its mahogany case towering nearly to the ceiling. The face was ivory, with Roman numerals etched in faded gold, and the hands pointed to just past 10 o'clock. Holmes ran his fingers along the wood, probing for irregularities. His movements deliberate yet swift. Watson joined him, peering at the clock's intricate carvings, vines and roses intertwined, a hallmark of Victorian craftsmanship. "It's a fine piece," he remarked, "but it looks ordinary enough. Do you think the key's hidden inside?" "Possibly," Holmes murmured, his attention fixed on a small panel near the base. He pressed gently, and a faint click echoed in the quiet. A narrow drawer slid open, revealing a velvet-lined compartment. Inside lay a brass key, no longer than a finger, its surface etched with peculiar symbols, spirals, and crosses that seemed to pulse in the dim light. Holmes lifted it carefully, turning it over in his gloved hand. "Well, that was almost too easy," Watson said, leaning closer. "Is that it? The key to the vault?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. If it were that simple, Watson, we'd be back at Baker Street by now. This key is a piece of the puzzle, but not the solution. Observe the symbol's occult in nature, possibly alchemical. They suggest a purpose beyond opening a lock. We must test it. The two made their way through the manor's labyrinthine corridors. The storm's roar muffled by thick stone walls. The vault lay in the basement, a massive iron door set into a wall of damp, moss-covered stone. The butler, Mr. Grayson, had reluctantly provided a lantern, his hands trembling as he warned them of the curse that clung to the vault. Holmes dismissed the superstition with a wave, though Watson's face betrayed a flicker of unease. As they descended the creaking stairs, the vault's door was a monolith, its surface pitted with age but unyielding. A single keyhole, flanked by faint engravings of the same occult symbols, stared back at them. Holmes inserted the brass key, turning it with a slow, deliberate motion. A dull clank sounded within, but the door remained shut. He tried again, varying the pressure, but the result was the same. "Blast," Watson muttered. "It doesn't work. Perhaps it's the wrong key." Holmes shook his head, withdrawing the key and examining it anew. "No, Watson. The key fits the lock perfectly, but the mechanism requires more. A combination, perhaps, or additional keys. The riddle spoke of the first, implying others. We must return to the journal, and a sudden crash from above cut him off. The lantern's flame flickered as a gust of wind swept through the basement, carrying the faint sound of footsteps. Holmes's hand shot to his pocket, where a small revolver lay hidden. Watson, ever the soldier, tensed, his own hand hovering near his coat. "Someone's in the manor," Holmes whispered, his voice low and sharp. "Stay close." They ascended the stairs silently, the lantern casting long shadows that danced. Across the walls, the dining hall was empty, the grandfather clock still ticking solemnly, but the window nearest it was ajar, rain pooling on the floor. Holmes crossed to it, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond. The grounds were a blur of wind-whipped trees, but a flicker of movement caught his attention, a cloaked figure darting toward the stables. "After them," Holmes hissed, already moving. Watson followed, their boots splashing through puddles as they plunged into the storm. The figure was swift, a shadow weaving through the rain, but Holmes's long strides closed the distance. They reached the stables. Just as the figure vanished into the night, leaving behind a torn scrap of paper caught on a splintered fence post, Holmes snatched it, shielding it from the rain as he read aloud by the lantern's light. Coordinates 51.5074 N, 0.1278 W, Central London, near St. Paul's. No, wait. His brow furrowed as he recalculated. These point closer. The Ashburn family crypt, half a mile from here. Watson wiped rain from his face, panting. The crypt? What's this fellow doing skulking about, leaving coordinates? And in this weather? A question we'll answer soon enough, Holmes said, pocketing the paper. Whoever they were, they're connected to the vault. Those coordinates are. No coincidence. We'll investigate at first light. The storm raged on, trapping them in the manor for the night. Holmes sat by the fire in the drawing room, the brass key resting on the table before him, its symbols glinting like a challenge. Watson, nursing a brandy, watched his friend's relentless mind at work. "You think this is all part of some grand scheme, don't you?" Watson asked. "The vault, the whispers, this prowler. It's not just a missing heir or a family curse. Holmes leaned back, his eyes half closed but burning with focus. Every detail points to a design, Watson. The whispers are no supernatural phenomenon. They're mechanical, an echo of something hidden. The key, the coordinates, the journal's code. They're threads in a tapestry. Evelyn Ashburn's disappearance is the knot we must untangle. And that crypt holds the next clue. Sleep eluded them both as the storm battered the manor. Holmes spent the night poring over the journal, cross-referencing its cryptic phrases with a map of the estate he'd sketched from memory. By dawn, the rain had softened to a drizzle, and the air was thick with the scent of wet earth. Holmes and Watson set out for the crypt, their coats heavy with dampness, the coordinates guiding them through the estate's overgrown paths. The Ashburn family crypt loomed at the edge of a wooded glade, its stone facade weathered but imposing. Ivy clung to the entrance, and a rusted iron gate creaked as Holmes pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold and stale, the walls lined with marble plaques bearing the names of long-dead Ashburns. A single stone sarcophagus dominated the center, its lid carved with the same occult symbols as the key. "Evelyn's not here," Watson said, scanning the plaques. "No record of her death." "Do you think she's still alive?" Holmes didn't answer, his attention fixed on the sarcophagus. He ran his fingers along its edges, searching for a mechanism. A faint click rewarded his efforts, and a section of the lid slid aside, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with diagrams of a complex lock, a triple-key mechanism with a phonetic trigger. A single line stood out. The second lies where the dead watched the stars. "The crypt's roof," Holmes said, his voice tinged with excitement. "There's a viewing platform above, used for stargazing in the family's eccentric past. Come, Watson." They climbed a hidden staircase behind the sarcophagus, emerging onto a flat stone platform, open to the sky. The drizzle had stopped, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating a circular stone embedded in the platform's center. Carved into it was a constellation Orion, its stars marked by tiny indentations. Holmes pressed, each one in sequence, following a pattern from the notebook. A panel shifted, revealing a second brass key, identical to the first, but for a single additional symbol, a crescent moon. "Two keys," Watson said, his voice a mix of awe and frustration. "How many more does this blasted vault need?" "At least one more, if the notebook is correct," Holmes replied, pocketing the key. "But we're not alone in this hunt. That prowler last night wasn't a random thief. They knew about the crypt, the coordinates. We're racing against an unknown adversary." As they descended from the crypt, a rustle in the trees stopped them cold. 3 figures emerged, cloaked and masked, their hands gripping knives that glinted in the morning light. Holmes's revolver was in his hand before Watson could blink. But the odds were grim. "Stay back, Watson," Holmes said, his voice steady. "We're not here to fight, gentlemen. Name your purpose." The leader, a tall figure with a scar visible beneath his mask, stepped forward. "The vault's ours, Holmes. Hand over the keys, or you'll not leave this glade." Holmes's eyes flicked to the trees, calculating. "You're ill-informed if you think we have all the keys. But I'll offer a trade information for your retreat. Who sent you?" The leader hesitated, then lunged. Holmes sidestepped. tripping the man with a swift motion and sending him sprawling. Watson tackled another, his military training kicking in, while Holmes disarmed the third with a precise strike to the wrist. The assailants, outnumbered in skill, if not in numbers, fled into the woods, leaving behind a single clue, a silver medallion etched with the same occult symbols as the keys. Holmes picked it up, his expression grim. "This is no mere robbery, Watson. These men are part of something larger, a society, perhaps, guarding or seeking the vault's contents. We're closer than ever, but the danger is growing." They returned to the manor, the second key and medallion in hand, the storm's aftermath leaving the estate eerily quiet. Holmes sat at the dining table, the journal open once more, his mind racing through possibilities. The coordinates, the keys, the symbols, they all pointed to a truth buried deeper than he'd imagined. Evelyn Ashburn's disappearance was no simple scandal. It was tied to something powerful, something worth killing for Dot as the sun climbed. Higher, Holmes traced the medallion's symbols, his thoughts a whirlwind of deduction. The crypt was a step, Watson, but not the end. The vault's true secret lies elsewhere, and this medallion is our next lead. We'll need to move quickly, our enemies won't rest, and neither shall we. The chapter closed with Holmes staring into the fire, the weight of the mystery pressing on him, yet his resolve unshaken. The vault's whispers called, and he would answer, no matter the cost. Chapter 4. Secrets beneath the crypt. The moon hung low over the Ashburn estate, a pale sickle casting a ghostly glow across the frost-kissed grounds. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson moved silently, their breaths forming faint clouds in the TV's louds in the clouds in the dund. Watson moved silently, their breaths forming faint clouds in the breeze, forming faint clouds in the tender, chilly night air. The coordinates from the torn note, scribbled in haste by the shadowy figure who had eluded them, pointed to the family crypt, a squat, ivy-choked structure nestled in a copse of gnarled oaks. Holmes's eyes gleamed with anticipation, his mind already dissecting the possibilities of what lay beneath. Watson, ever the loyal companion, gripped his revolver tightly, his nerves taut but his trust in Holmes unwavering. The crypt's iron gate creaked as Holmes pushed it open, the sound echoing like a warning in the still night. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the scent of earth and decay. Holmes lit a small lantern, its flickering light revealing rows of weathered stone sarcophagi, their surfaces etched with the names of long-dead Ashburns. Watson's gaze darted to the shadows, half expecting another ambush. But Holmes's focus was razor-sharp, fixed on the coordinates, a precise location marked within the crypt's confines. "These coordinates are not random," Holmes murmured, his voice low but resonant in the enclosed space. "They point to a specific point, likely a hidden mechanism or passage." The Ashburns were no strangers to secrecy. Watson nodded, his eyes scanning the walls. "This place gives me the chills, Holmes. Do you think the vault itself is down here?" "Not the vault itself," Holmes replied, running his fingers along a seam in the stonework. "But a clue to its unlocking, perhaps. The vault's whispers suggest a design beyond mere storage, a puzzle meant to guard something extraordinary." They moved deeper into the crypt, the lantern casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Holmes paused at a sarcophagus bearing the name Evelyn Ashburn, though its dates were conspicuously absent. He knelt, examining the base, where a faint indentation caught his eye. With a gentle press, a click echoed, and a section of the floor slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Good Lord," Watson whispered, peering into the void. "A hidden chamber beneath a crypt? This family's secrets run deeper than I imagined." Holmes's lips twitched in a rare smile. "Indeed, Watson. Let us descend and see what truths lie buried." The staircase was steep, its stone steps worn smooth by time or use. Holmes led the way, his lantern illuminating crude carvings on the wall symbols, matching those on the brass key they'd found in the clock. At the bottom, they entered a circular chamber, its walls adorned with faded murals. The air was colder here, and the silence felt oppressive, broken only by the faint drip of water somewhere in the distance. The murals depicted a procession of robed figures, their hands raised toward a central image, a vault-like structure radiating lines that suggested sound or vibration. Holmes traced the lines with his finger, his mind racing. "These are no mere decorations," he said. "They tell the story of the vault's creation, a work of a secretive order, perhaps the same society hinted at in Evelyn's journal." Watson frowned, studying the figures. A secret society? That sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. What were they hiding? "Something worth killing for," Holmes replied, his tone grim. He moved to the center of the chamber, where a stone pedestal stood, its surface etched with a grid of interlocking grooves. "A mechanical puzzle," he said, his eyes alight with the thrill of discovery. "The coordinates led us here for a reason. This must be the next step." The puzzle was intricate, a series of sliding tiles marked with the same occult symbols. Holmes's fingers moved deftly, testing combinations, his mind calculating patterns with machine-like precision. Watson stood guard, his revolver at the ready, though the crypt's silence was unnerving. After several minutes, a soft click resounded, and a compartment in the pedestal opened, revealing a second key, this one silver, its surface etched with a spiral pattern that mirrored the murals. Holmes held it up, the lantern light glinting off its surface. "The second key," he said, "but I suspect it alone will not suffice. The vault's mechanism is complex, likely requiring multiple components." Watson's relief was palpable, but it was short-lived. A faint scuffle echoed from the staircase, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, deliberate, heavy, and approaching. Holmes extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. "We are not alone," he whispered, pulling Watson behind a sarcophagus. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by low voices. Two figures emerged into the chamber, their silhouettes barely visible in the faint moonlight filtering through a high grate. They carried lanterns of their own, casting harsh shadows across the murals. One was tall and broad-shouldered, his voice gruff as he spoke. "The master won't be pleased if we return empty-handed. The key must be here." The other, smaller and wiry, sounded nervous. "This place is cursed, I tell you." "Those whispers, did you hear them last night? Like ghosts begging to be freed." "Superstition," the larger man snapped. "Focus. Crane wants that vault opened, and he doesn't care how many of us die trying." Holmes's eyes narrowed at the mention of Crane, a name he'd yet to connect to the case, but one that carried the weight of menace. He signaled to Watson, who nodded, gripping his revolver tighter. The men began searching the chamber, there, lanterns sweeping over the walls. Holmes waited, his mind calculating their movements, their weaknesses. When the smaller man approached the pedestal, Holmes sprang into action. With a swift motion, he disarmed the man, pinning him to the ground. Watson trained his revolver on the larger assailant, who froze, his lantern clattering to the floor. "Who sent you?" Holmes demanded, his voice cold as steel. The pinned man struggled, but Holmes's grip was unyielding. "Crenell have." "Your head for this?" he spat. "You don't know what you're meddling with." "I know precisely what I'm meddling with," Holmes retorted. "A vault, a secret society, and a man named Crane who seems overly interested in both. Now, speak or I'll ensure Scotland Yard takes an interest in you." The larger man lunged, but Watson fired a warning shot, the sound deafening in the confined space. The man froze, hands raised. "We don't know much," he growled. "Crane hired us to find the keys. Said the vault holds something worth more than gold." Holmes's eyes flickered to the silver key in his hand. "And where is Crane now?" The smaller man, still pinned, sneered. "You'll never find him. He's got eyes everywhere." Holmes released the man, stepping back. "Take your companion and leave," he said. "Tell Crane that Sherlock Holmes is on his trail. He'll find me a far more formidable opponent than a hired thug." The men scrambled up the staircase, their lanterns bobbing as they fled. Watson lowered his revolver, his brow furrowed. Holmes was that wise, letting them go? "They'll lead us to Crane," Holmes said, retrieving the fallen lantern. "And they've left us something far more valuable." He knelt, picking up a medallion that had fallen from the smaller man's pocket. Its surface bore the same spiral symbol as the silver key, but its edges were worn, suggesting age and frequent handling. Watson peered at it. "Another clue, indeed," Holmes said, pocketing the medallion. "This symbol ties our assailants to the secret society and to Evelyn Ashbourne. We're closer to the vault's secret, Watson, but the danger is far from over." They ascended the staircase, emerging into the crypt as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The manor loomed in the distance, its silhouette stark against the paling sky. Holmes's mind was already racing ahead, piecing together the fragments, the keys, the symbols, the whispers, and now Crane, a name that promised answers and peril in equal measure. As they made their way back to the manor, Watson glanced at Holmes. "What's next, then?" "We've got 2 keys, but the vault's still locked, and now we've got this Crane fellow to worry about." Holmes's eyes gleamed with determination. "Next, we decipher the journal's remaining secrets and track this Victor Crane. The vault's whispers are no mere anomaly. They're a call to uncover a truth buried for decades. And I intend to answer that call." The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. Holmes walked with purpose, the silver key and medallion heavy in his pocket, each a piece of a puzzle that was slowly taking shape. The Ashbourne estate, with its crumbling walls and hidden chambers, was a labyrinth of secrets, and Holmes was determined to navigate its depths, no matter the cost. The manor was quiet when they returned, its halls bathed in the soft light of early morning. Lord Ashbourne was nowhere to be seen, but the butler, Mr. Harrow, greeted them with a nervous nod. "You were out late, gentlemen," he said, his eyes darting to the mud on their boots. "I trust you found what you were looking for." Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "We found more than we expected, Mr. Harrow. Tell me, have you ever heard of a man named Victor Crane?" The butler paled, his hands trembling slightly. "Crane? No, sir. I don't know the name." "Why do you ask?" Holmes watched him closely, noting the flicker of fear in his eyes. "No reason," he said. "Lightly, merely a name that came up in our inquiries. We'll need access to the library again. There are matters yet to resolve." Harrow nodded, leading them to the library, where the air was thick with the scent of old books and wax polish. Holmes returned to Evelyn's journal, its coded pages now partially deciphered. The silver key and medallion lay on the table, their symbols a silent challenge. Watson paced, his mind still on the crypt. Those men weren't common thieves, Holmes. They were organized, purposeful. Crane must be someone important. Important and dangerous, Holmes agreed, his pen scratching across a sheet of paper. As he worked through the journal's cipher, the medallion suggests a connection to the same order that built the vault. Crane may be a modern agent, seeking what Evelyn hid all those years ago. Hours passed as Holmes pored over the journal, his concentration unbroken. Watson, restless, examined the library's shelves, pulling out volumes on Ashburn history. One book, a thin treatise on local folklore, mentioned a brotherhood of the spiral, a secretive group tied to the estate's construction in the 17th century. The symbol on its cover matched the medallion's design. "Holmes, look at this," Watson said, holding up the book. "It says the Brotherhood believed in guarding knowledge through sound, something about vibrations holding the key to truth." Holmes's eyes lit up. "Sound," he murmured. "The whispers in the vault. They're not random. They're part of its mechanism, an acoustic lock of sorts. Evelyn's work must have built on the Brotherhood's principles." He turned back to the journal, his fingers tracing a line of code. The cipher mentions a third key and a phrase, truth. Unlocks all. The keys are physical, but the phrase may be the final component, spoken to activate the vault's mechanism. Watson frowned. A spoken phrase in a vault? That's unusual. "Not for a mind like Evelyn's," Holmes said. "She was a genius, Watson, ahead of her time. If she designed the vault, it would be a masterpiece of engineering and deception." The day wore on, with Holmes piecing together fragments of the cipher. By late afternoon, he had deciphered a new passage, a reference to a chandelier of stars in the manor's great hall. "The third key," he said, rising. "It's hidden in plain sight, as always." They hurried to the great hall, where an enormous chandelier hung, its crystal prisms catching the fading light. Holmes climbed the ladder, his movements precise, and examined the fixture. After a moment, he found it, a small compartment concealed among the crystals, containing a third key, this one gold, its surface etched with a starburst pattern. "3 keys," Watson said, marveling. "But we still don't know where the chindeng de the vault is." Holmes pocketed the key, his expression resolute. "The vault is closer than we think, Watson. The journal, the keys, the whispers, they all point to a truth hidden within the manor itself. Tonight we'll test the keys and the phrase, but first we must prepare for Crane's next move." As night fell, the manor seemed to hold its breath. Holmes and Watson sat by the fire, the 3 keys and medallion on the table before them. The butler had retired, and Lord Ashburn remained absent, leaving them alone with their thoughts. Watson's hand rested on his revolver, his instincts warning of danger. Holmes, however, was calm, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. "Crane's men will return," Holmes said. "They know we have the keys, but they don't know the phrase or the vault's true nature. That gives us the advantage." Watson nodded, though his unease lingered. "And if the vault isn't what we expect, what if it's dangerous?" Holmes's gaze was steady. "Then we'll face it, Watson, as we always do. The truth is worth the risk." The clock struck 11, and the Manor's silence deepened. Holmes rose, gathering the keys. "Midnight approaches. Let's find the vault and end this mystery." They moved through the manor, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The vault's location remained elusive, but Holmes's instincts led them to the basement where the whispers had been loudest. The walls were bare, save for a single iron door, its surface unadorned but for 3 keyholes and a small grate. Holmes inserted the keys brass, silver, gold each fitting perfectly. He leaned toward the grate and spoke, his voice clear. "Truth unlocks all." A low rumble shook the floor, and the door began to slide open, revealing a chamber bathed in faint, otherworldly light. But before they could step inside, a shout rang out behind them. Crane's men, armed and advancing. Holmes grabbed Watson, pulling him into the chamber as the door slammed shut, locking their pursuers out. Inside, the chamber was unlike anything they'd expected. No treasure, no artifacts, just a pedestal with a single object, a phonograph cylinder, its surface gleaming in the dim light. And from it, faint but unmistakable, came the whispers, a woman's voice pleading, "Help me." "The truth, it's here." Holmes's eyes widened. "Evelyn," he whispered, "the vault isn't a place. It's her voice, her secret, preserved all these years." Watson stared, incredulous. "A recording? All this for a recording?" "Not just a recording," Holmes said, lifting the cylinder carefully. "A message, a confession, and perhaps the key to everything Crane seeks." As they stood in the chamber, the whispers grew louder, echoing Evelyn's plea. Holmes's mind raced, piecing together the final fragments of the puzzle. The vault's secret was no mere treasure. It was knowledge, power, and a truth that someone was willing to kill for. And Sherlock Holmes was determined to uncover it all. Chapter 5. The Whispering Code. The rain had ceased its relentless drumming against the windows of Ashbourne Manor, leaving behind a damp chill that seemed to seep into the very stones of the ancient building. Sherlock Holmes stood by the fireplace. In the grand library, his lean frame silhouetted against the flickering flames. His sharp eyes scanned the pages of the old journal he had discovered the previous day, its brittle pages filled with cryptic symbols and fragmented sentences. The journal, penned by the long-vanished Evelyn Ashbourne, was proving to be a labyrinth of secrets, each clue leading to another locked door in the mystery of the whispering vault. Dr. John Watson sat at a heavy oak table nearby, his notebook open before him, scribbling observations with a furrowed brow. The manor's oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards or the distant howl of wind through the chimneys. The eerie whispers they had heard at midnight the previous night lingered in Watson's mind, their disjointed pleas echoing like a half-remembered dream. "Holmes," he said, glancing up, "do you truly believe those whispers are tied to this journal?" They seemed almost alive. Holmes did not look up from the journal, his long fingers tracing a line of coded text. "Alive, Watson?" "No, but purposeful, certainly. The whispers are not supernatural, though the Ashbourne family's flair for the dramatic might suggest otherwise. They are an acoustic phenomenon, likely engineered to protect or conceal something within the vault. This journal holds the key not just to the vault, but to the mind of Evelyn Ashburn herself. Watson leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "And you're certain you can crack this code?" "It looks like gibberish to me." Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Gibberish to the untrained eye, perhaps. But to one who observes, it is a symphony of logic waiting to be conducted. The code is a variant of a Polybius square, layered with a substitution cipher. Evelyn was no ordinary woman. She was a mathematician of extraordinary talent, and her secrets are guarded by intellect, not superstition." He set the journal down and produced a sheet of paper from his pocket, covered in his precise handwriting. Columns of letters and numbers formed a grid, with annotations scrawled in the margins. "The first clue, as I deciphered yesterday, led us to the brass key hidden in the clock. But the journal suggests the vault requires 3 keys, each tied to a specific mechanism and a spoken phrase to complete the sequence. The whispers we heard are likely an echo of that phrase, distorted by the manor's architecture." Watson frowned, glancing toward the library's towering shelves, their shadows dancing in the firelight. 3 keys? We have only one so far, and it didn't even open the vault. And a phrase? How are we to guess what Evelyn meant us to say? Not guess, Watson. Deduce. Holmes's tone was sharp, but his eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase. The journal's next riddle is already yielding its secrets. Observe this passage. He pointed to a line of symbols interspersed with numbers and dashes. It describes a location within the manor, one tied to light and reflection. I suspect it refers to a chandelier in the great hall. If I'm correct, the second key lies there. Watson stood, stretching his stiff limbs. The great hall? That's the room with those monstrous crystal chandeliers. They must weigh a ton. How do you propose we investigate without bringing the whole thing crashing down? Holmes chuckled softly, closing the journal with a snap. Carefully, my dear Watson, always carefully. The great hall of Ashburn Manor was a cavernous space, its high ceilings adorned with faded frescoes of cherubs and vines. The chandeliers, 3 massive structures of crystal and brass hung. Like frozen waterfalls, their prisms catching the dim light of the gas lamps and scattering it in fractured rainbows across the marble floor. Holmes and Watson stood beneath the largest of the 3, its intricate framework glinting ominously in the half-light. Holmes produced a small pocket telescope from his coat and trained it on the chandelier's central column. The riddle speaks of a star within a star, he murmured. The chandelier's design is symmetrical, but there is a focal point, a central prism, that reflects light differently from the others. If Evelyn hid a key here, it would be in a place that rewards observation. Watson squinted upward, his neck craning. I don't see anything unusual, just a lot of glass and dust. Patience, Watson. Holmes adjusted the telescope, his movements precise. After a moment, he lowered it and pointed to a cluster of crystals near the chandelier's base. There, a slight irregularity in the alignment. One crystal is misaligned, its facets catching the light at an odd angle. That is our star. Getting to the chandelier was no small feat. The manor's staff, though sparse, had been instructed by Lord Ashburn to assist Holmes and Watson, and the anxious butler, Mr. Grayson, summoned a pair of groundsmen to fetch a ladder. The ladder, an ancient wooden contraption, creaked alarmingly as Holmes ascended, his movements as sure as a cat's despite the precarious height. Watson stood below, gripping the ladder's base, his heart in his throat. "Be careful, Holmes," he called. "If you fall, I'll have to explain to Mrs. Hudson why I brought you back in pieces." Holmes's voice floated down, tinged with amusement. "Your concern is noted, Watson, but unnecessary. I have climbed far more perilous heights than this." At the chandelier's base, Holmes reached out, his fingers brushing the misaligned crystal. It was larger than the others, its surface etched with faint lines that matched the occult symbols on the brass key from the clock. With a gentle twist, the crystal came loose, revealing a small compartment within the chandelier's frame. Inside lay a second key, silver and slender, its head shaped like a crescent moon. Holmes descended, holding the key aloft triumphantly. "The second piece of the puzzle," he said, turning it over in his hands. "But we are not done yet. The journal suggests a third key, and the phrase remains elusive." Watson took the key, examining its delicate craftsmanship. "These symbols again, they're the same as on the first key. Do you think they're part of the phrase?" "Possibly," Holmes replied, his eyes narrowing. "But I suspect the phrase is something more personal to Evelyn, something tied to her life, her work, or her betrayal. We must dig deeper into her story." Back in the library, Holmes resumed his study of the journal, his pen flying across his paper as he decoded line after line. Watson, meanwhile, took it upon himself to explore the manor's records, searching for any mention of Evelyn Ashburn's final days. In a dusty ledger tucked away in a corner cabinet, he found a servant's account written in a shaky hand, dated shortly after Evelyn's disappearance. The account described Evelyn as a brilliant but troubled woman, often seen pacing the manor's halls at night, muttering about a great work that would change the world. The servant, a maid named Clara, wrote of overhearing Evelyn arguing with a man in the library, a man she called Victor. The name sent a chill down Watson's spine, though he knew it was unlikely to be Victor Crane, the artifact smuggler they would later encounter. Clara's account ended with a haunting line. Miss Evelyn said the truth would unlock all, but it would cost her everything. Watson hurried to Holmes, the ledger clutched in his hands. "Holmes, listen to this," he said, reading the passage aloud. "The truth would unlock all. Could that be the phrase?" Holmes's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with realization. "Watson, you've done it. Truth unlocks all. It fits perfectly, 3 words, a declaration of Evelyn's philosophy and a key to her secrets. She was a woman who valued knowledge above all else, even at the cost of her own safety. The phrase must be spoken to activate the vault's mechanism." Watson beamed, though his excitement was tempered by a nagging unease. But what about the third key? And why did Evelyn go to such lengths to hide all this? Holmes leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Evelyn was protecting something or someone. Her disappearance was no accident. It was a calculated act to safeguard her work. The third key will confirm my theory, but we must search the manor thoroughly. The journal's final riddle points to a place of eternal rest, which I believe refers to the Ashburn family chapel. The chapel was a small ivy-covered building on the manor's grounds, its stained glass windows depicting solemn saints and faded angels. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened again, threatening another storm. Holmes and Watson entered the chapel, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, and a single candle flickered on the altar, casting long shadows. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the pews, the walls, the altar itself. The riddle speaks of rest beneath the watchful eye, he said. The chapel is a place of rest, but the watchful eye suggests a specific focal point. Watson pointed to a large stained glass window above the altar, its central panel depicting an eye surrounded by rays of light. Could that be it? Holmes nodded, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Well observed, Watson. Let us examine the altar more closely. The altar was a simple stone slab, its surface worn smooth by centuries of use. Holmes ran his fingers along its edges, searching for hidden catches or seams. After a moment, he pressed a small carving of a cross, and a faint click echoed through the chapel. A panel in the altar's base slid open, revealing a small iron box. Inside lay the third key, gold and ornate, its head shaped like a sunburst. Holmes held the key up to the candlelight, its surface glinting. "The sun, the moon, and the star," he said softly. 3 keys, each a piece of Evelyn's puzzle. Now we have them all, and the phrase to unlock the vault. But I fear we are not alone in this game. Watson glanced toward the chapel's door, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver in his coat. "You think Crane's men are watching us?" "Not Crane's men, perhaps, but someone," Holmes replied. "The shadowy figure we chased last night, the medallion we found in the crypt, these are signs of a larger network. Evelyn's secret was valuable enough to kill for, and we must be prepared for what lies ahead." That night, Holmes and Watson returned to the vault, a heavy iron door set deep in the manor's cellar. The air was damp and cold, the silence broken only by the faint drip of water somewhere in the darkness. The vault's surface was engraved with the same occult symbols as the keys, and 3 keyholes formed a triangle at its center. Holmes inserted the brass key from the clock, the silver key from the chandelier, and the gold key from the chapel. Each turned with a satisfying click, but the door remained shut. He leaned close, his voice steady and clear. "Truth unlocks all." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low groan, the vault door shuddered and began to swing inward, revealing a dark chamber beyond. The whispers grew louder, no longer disjointed but forming a single, haunting voice. "Help me," it said, over and over, a woman's voice filled with desperation. Watson's face paled. "Holmes, that's her, Evelyn." Holmes's expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with intensity. Not Evelyn Watson, but a remnant of her. The vault's design amplifies sound from a hidden chamber, likely a recording or a mechanical trick. We are close to the truth, but we must proceed with caution. They stepped into the chamber, their lanterns casting flickering light on the stone walls. At the center stood a pedestal, but no treasure or artifact awaited them, only a small, locked box, its surface etched with the now familiar symbols. Holmes examined it, his fingers probing for a latch, but before he could open it, a shadow moved at the edge of the chamber. "Holmes!" Watson shouted, drawing his revolver as a figure lunged from the darkness. Holmes spun, dodging a blade that glinted in the lantern light. The attacker, cloaked and masked, was joined by another, and a brief, chaotic struggle ensued. Holmes's quick reflexes and Watson's steady aim drove the assailants back, and they fled into the shadows of the cellar. Breathing heavily, Watson lowered his weapon. Who the devil were they? "Agents of our unseen adversary," Holmes said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "They seek what Evelyn hid, but they will not have it. Not while we stand in their way." He returned to the box, his hand steady despite the attack. With a deft movement, he opened it, revealing a small, intricate device, a phonograph cylinder, its surface worn but intact. "This," Holmes said, holding it up, "is the source of the whispers, and, I suspect, the key to Evelyn's greatest secret." As the night deepened, Holmes and Watson retreated to the library, the phonograph cylinder placed carefully on the table. Holmes examined it under a magnifying glass, noting tiny scratches and markings that suggested it had been used. Repeatedly, "This is no ordinary recording," he said. "Evelyn used this to preserve her voice, her message. But why? What was so important that she hid it behind such an elaborate puzzle?" Watson sat across from him, his mind racing. "You said the vault's whispers were an acoustic anomaly. Could this cylinder be part of some larger machine? Something she invented?" Holmes's eyes lit up. "An excellent deduction, Watson. Evelyn was a scientist, a visionary. The journal hints at a great work, a device capable of manipulating sound in ways we can scarcely imagine. The whispers are not just her voice. They are a demonstration of her invention's power." He leaned back, his mind working furiously. "The cylinder is only part of the puzzle. The device itself must be hidden elsewhere in the manor or beyond. We have the keys, the phrase, and now the voice, but the final piece remains out of reach." Watson glanced at the journal, its pages still heavy with secrets. "What now, Holmes? If Crane or his men are after this device, they won't stop. And if it's as powerful as you say, it could be dangerous in the wrong hands." Holmes nodded, his expression grim. "We must find the device before they do." The journal's final entries mention a place of trade, a location where Evelyn conducted her experiments. "I suspect it refers to a workshop or laboratory, possibly outside the manor. Tomorrow, we will follow the trail of the medallion and the map we found in the crypt. They will lead us to Victor Crane, and I hope, to the heart of Evelyn's mystery." The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows across the library. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the faint echo of whispers that no longer seemed confined to the vault. Holmes sat in silence, his mind a whirlwind of deductions, while Watson watched him, knowing that the greatest challenge of their investigation still lay ahead. Chapter 6. The Traitor's Trail. Fog hung low over London, a thick gray shroud that clung to the cobblestones and muffled the clatter of hooves and wheels. Sherlock Holmes sat in the dim glow of 221B Baker Street, his fingers steepled beneath. His chin, the medallion from the crypt resting on the table before him. Its intricate symbols, spirals, and intersecting lines gleamed faintly under the lamplight. A puzzle yet to be fully unraveled. Dr. John Watson, seated across from him, sipped his tea, his brow furrowed as he watched his friend's intense focus. "Holmes," Watson ventured, breaking the silence, "that medallion's been staring back at you for hours. Have you made any sense of it?" Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile, his eyes never leaving the object. "Patience, Watson. It is not the medallion itself, but its origins that intrigue me. These symbols are not mere decoration, they are a cipher, a signature of intent. And I believe they point us to the heart of this conspiracy." Watson set down his cup, leaning forward. "Conspiracy? You think this goes beyond Lord Ashbourne's vault?" "Far beyond," Holmes replied, his voice low and measured. "The vault, the whispers, The keys all pieces of a larger game. Evelyn Ashburn's disappearance was no accident, and this medallion is a thread that may lead us to those who orchestrated it. We must trace its provenance." Holmes rose abruptly, his movements precise as he donned his overcoat and scarf. "Come, Watson. The hour grows late, and London's underbelly does not sleep. We have an antiquarian to visit." The streets of London were a labyrinth of shadow and sound as Holmes and Watson made their way to a narrow alley off Fleet Street, where a small, cluttered shop bore the sign Harrington's Curiosities. The antiquarian, Mr. Josiah Harrington, was known to Holmes as a man who dealt in objects of dubious origin, a purveyor of relics that often carried whispers of scandal or crime. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, the air thick with the musty scent of old books and polished brass. Harrington, a wiry man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, looked up from a ledger, his expression shifting from curiosity to unease as he recognized Holmes. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice tight, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Holmes produced the medallion, holding it up so the light caught its surface. "This, Mr. Harrington, I believe it passed through your hands. I require the name of the buyer and any details you can provide." Harrington's eyes darted to the medallion, then back to Holmes. His hands fidgeted with a quill pen. I deal in many items, sir. That one. It's familiar, perhaps, but I'd need to check. My records." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Your memory, Mr. Harrington, is renowned in certain circles. I suggest you exercise it now, lest I involve Inspector Lestrade and a warrant to search your premises." The antiquarian swallowed hard, his fingers trembling as he adjusted his spectacles. "Very well," he muttered. "I sold it last month to a gentleman named Victor Crane, a collector of sorts, though his interests lean toward unconventional artifacts. He paid handsomely, no questions asked." "Victor Crane," Holmes repeated, his tone betraying no surprise. "And what did he say of his intentions?" Harrington hesitated, then lowered his voice. "He mentioned something about a vault, an old one, tied to a family of note. Sighed he needed the medallion for authentication. I didn't press him. Men like Crane don't take kindly to questions." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And where might we find Mr. Crane?" "He's not one to linger in respectable places," Harrington said, glancing nervously at the door. "But I've heard he frequents the Black Rose, a tavern near the docks. There's talk of an auction tonight, rare items, no questions asked. Crane might be there." Holmes placed the medallion back in his pocket, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Your cooperation is noted. Should I find you've withheld anything, I shall return." As they stepped back into the fog, Watson glanced at Holmes. "Victor Crane. Sounds like trouble." "Indeed," Holmes replied, his stride quickening. "A smuggler of artifacts, a man who thrives in the shadows of London's black market. If he seeks the vault's contents, we must move swiftly. To the Black Rose, Watson." The Black Rose was a den of smoke and whispers, tucked in a grimy corner of the East End, where the Thames's stench mingled with the tang of cheap ale. Its patrons were a motley crew, sailors, thieves, and dealers in illicit goods, their faces shadowed by caps and hoods. Holmes, disguised as a weathered sailor with a false beard and a cap pulled low, moved through the crowd with ease, Watson at his side in similar attire. The doctor's discomfort was evident, his hand resting near, the revolver concealed beneath his coat. "Holmes," Watson whispered, "this place feels like a powder keg." "Are you sure about this?" "Certain," Holmes replied, his eyes scanning the room. "Crane is here. I can feel it. Look for a man who carries himself with authority, yet avoids attention. He'll be near the back, where deals are struck." They took a table in a dimly lit corner, ordering drinks to blend in. The auction was already underway. A wiry auctioneer barking prices for items that ranged from stolen paintings to ancient relics. Holmes's attention sharpened as a velvet cloth was lifted to reveal a parchment map, its edges frayed, but its surface marked with intricate lines and symbols. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer called. "A rare find a map," said two. "Lead to a hidden treasure beneath a noble estate. Bidding starts at £50. Holmes leaned toward Watson, his voice barely audible. "That map. It's linked to the Ashbourne vault. See the symbols along the border? They match the medallion." Before Watson could respond, a man in a dark coat rose from a table near the back, his bid sharp and commanding. £100. Holmes's gaze locked onto him. The man was tall, with a lean frame and a scar running along his jaw, partially hidden by a scarf. His movements were deliberate, his eyes cold and calculating. "Victor Crane," Holmes murmured. "He's bolder then." "I expected." The bidding escalated, voices rising in a chaotic clamor. Holmes signaled Watson to stay put, then slipped into the crowd, his disguise allowing him to approach the auctioneer's platform unnoticed. As the bids climbed, Holmes's nimble fingers worked, lifting the map from its display during a moment of distraction. He tucked it into his coat and retreated to Watson's side, his expression calm despite the audacity of the theft. "We have it," Holmes whispered. "Now we leave quietly." But their exit was not to be so simple. As they reached the door, a shout rang out, "Thief!" The auctioneer's voice cut through the din, and heads turned. Crane's eyes locked onto Holmes, recognition flashing in them despite the disguise. He barked an order, and three burly men pushed through the crowd, blocking the exit. "Run, Watson!" Holmes hissed, shoving his friend toward a side door. They burst into an alley, the fog swallowing them as footsteps pounded behind. The chase was relentless, weaving through narrow streets and over slick cobblestones. Holmes's mind raced, calculating routes and diversions. He led Watson into a cluttered yard behind a warehouse, where they ducked behind a stack of crates. The pursuers paused, their voices harsh in the night air, spread out. One growled, "Crane wants them alive." Holmes's eyes scanned their surroundings, spotting a loose board in the fence. "This way," he whispered, prying it open. They slipped through, emerging onto a quiet street as the shouts faded behind them. Breathing heavily, Watson clutched his side, his face flushed. "Holmes," he panted. "That was too close." Was the map worth it? Holmes unfolded the parchment, his eyes gleaming as he studied it under a flickering street lamp. "More than worth it, Watson. This map details a network of tunnels beneath the Ashbourne Manor, likely used by the secret society Evelyn was entangled with. These passages may lead us to the vault or to those who guard its secrets." Watson shook his head, a wry smile forming. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Holmes's lips quirked. "The game is afoot, Watson, and I intend to play it to the end." Back at 221B Baker Street, Holmes spread the map across the table, his fingers tracing the lines that marked tunnels snaking beneath the manor. The symbols along the edges matched those on the medallion and keys, confirming their connection. "These tunnels," Holmes said, "were not built for mere storage. They are a labyrinth, designed to protect or conceal. The vault is only part of the puzzle." Watson peered over his shoulder. "And Crane?" "He's not the sort to give up easily." "No," Holmes agreed, his voice grim. "He is a predator, and we have taken his prize. He will come for us or for the vault. We must be ready." The next morning, Holmes and Watson returned to the Ashburn Manor, the map tucked securely in Holmes's coat. Lord Ashburn greeted them, his face pale and drawn, as if the weight of his family's secrets had grown heavier overnight. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "have you made progress? The whispers, they were louder last night." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "We are close, my lord. But I must ask for access to the manor's cellars. There are passages below that may hold answers." Ashburn hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. The butler will show you the way." The cellars were damp and shadowed, their stone walls slick with moss. The butler, a stoic man named Perkins, led them to a heavy iron door, its surface rusted but sturdy. "This is as far as anyone goes," he said, his voice low. "The old tunnels are unsafe. Lord Ashburn forbids entry." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Thank you, Perkins. We shall take it from here." As the butler retreated, Holmes examined the door, his fingers probing for hidden mechanisms. The map indicated a lock concealed within the stonework, and after a moment's search, he found it, a small recess that matched the medallion's shape. He pressed the medallion into it, and with a grinding groan, the door swung open, revealing a dark, yawning passage. Watson lit a lantern, its light casting eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls. "Holmes," he said, his voice echoing, "this feels like a tomb." "Or a fortress," Holmes replied, stepping forward. "Stay close, Watson. The map suggests traps ahead." The tunnel sloped downward, its air growing colder with each step. The map guided them through forks and turns, each marked with the same occult symbols. Holmes's pace was steady, his eyes scanning for danger. At one point, he stopped abruptly, his hand raised. "Wait," he said, kneeling to examine the floor. A faint seam ran across the stone, barely visible. A pressure plate. "Step carefully." They navigated around it, their boots silent on the damp stone. Further on, a low hum filled the air, and Holmes paused, his head tilted. "Do you hear that, Watson?" Watson frowned, straining to listen. "The whispers again?" "Not quite," Holmes said. "It's mechanical, a faint vibration. We're close to something." The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings. At its center stood a pedestal, but it was empty. The vault nowhere in sight. Holmes's eyes narrowed as he studied the room. "This is not the end," he said. "There's more here." He circled the chamber, his fingers brushing the walls until he found a loose stone. Pressing it, he triggered a hidden panel, which slid open to reveal a narrow alcove. Inside was a small, ornate box, its surface engraved with the familiar symbols. Holmes opened it, revealing a folded note and a tiny brass lever. The note read, "The truth is not in stone, but in sound. Speak and be free." Holmes's eyes lit up. "Evelyn's work," he said. "The vault is not a physical lock, but a sonic one. The phrase, 'Truth unlocks all,' is the key, but it must be spoken in the right place." Before Watson could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the chamber. Holmes spun, his hand on his revolver, as three figures emerged from the shadows' cranes. Men, their faces grim. The leader, a burly man with a scarred lip, sneered. "You've gone far enough, Holmes. Hand over the map and the box." Holmes's voice was calm, almost amused. "You assume I'm unprepared. A mistake." In a flash, he tossed the lantern to Watson, who caught it as Holmes darted to the side, drawing the men's attention. Watson swung the lantern, its light blinding the leader, while Holmes tackled another, disarming him with a swift strike. The third man lunged, but Watson's revolver was already drawn, its barrel steady. "Enough," Holmes barked, pinning his opponent. "Tell Crane his game is over. The vault's secrets are mine." The men fled, their footsteps echoing in the dark. Holmes retrieved the box, his expression grim. "They'll return," he said. "We must act quickly." Back at the manor, Holmes studied the box and note, his mind racing. The lever, he deduced, was part of a larger mechanism, likely hidden in the manor above. The map showed one final passage, leading to a chamber beneath the library. "We're close, Watson," he said. "Tomorrow we find the heart of the vault and Evelyn's truth." As night fell, Holmes sat by the fire, the map and box before him. The whispers seemed to linger in the air, a reminder of the mystery's depth. Watson watched his friend, knowing the danger was far from over. The trail of the traitor, Victor Crane, was clear, but the vault's final secret remained just out of reach. Chapter 7. Into the labyrinth. The rain had stopped, but the air hung heavy with damp as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood at the edge of the Ashbourne Manor's overgrown garden, staring at the rusted iron grate half hidden by ivy. The stolen map, now creased and slightly smudged from their hurried escape from the black market auction, lay open in Holmes's hands. Its faded lines and cryptic annotations pointed to this very spot, a forgotten entrance to a network of tunnels beneath the estate. The moonlight, pale and fleeting through the scudding clouds, cast long shadows across the muddy ground, giving the scene an air of foreboding. Holmes's sharp eyes traced the map's contours, his finger pausing at a symbol resembling a coiled serpent. "This," he said, his voice low but steady, "marks the primary access point. The tunnels are old, Watson likely predating the manor itself. Built, perhaps, by the same secretive order that constructed the vault." He folded the map with precision and tucked it into his coat pocket, his gaze fixed on the grate. "We must proceed with utmost caution. If Victor Crane's men are as desperate as they seem, they may already be watching." Watson adjusted his grip on the revolver he'd insisted on bringing, his face set in a determined frown. "And if we're caught down there, Holmes?" "Narrow tunnels, no room to maneuver. It's a death trap." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Then we shall ensure we are not caught. Come, Watson, the night grows no younger." Together, they knelt by the grate, its iron bars cold and slick with moss. Holmes produced a small crowbar from his satchel, working it into the rusted hinges with practiced ease. The metal groaned, resisting at first, then gave way with a reluctant screech. Watson winced at the sound, glancing over his shoulder toward the darkened manor, but no lights flickered in its windows. The estate remained silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl. The grate opened to reveal a stone shaft descending into darkness, its walls slick with moisture. A faint, musty odor wafted upward, carrying hints of earth and decay. Holmes lit a small lantern, its weak flame casting a golden glow that barely reached the bottom of the shaft. A rusted ladder, bolted to the stone, disappeared into the shadows below. "After you, Holmes," Watson muttered, half in jest, though his knuckles whitened around the revolver. Holmes descended first, his movements swift and silent, the lantern swinging gently in his hand. Watson followed, his boots scraping against the iron rungs. The air grew colder as they descended, the damp seeping through their coats. At the bottom, they found themselves in a narrow tunnel, its walls hewn from rough stone and supported by ancient wooden beams. The lantern's light revealed cobwebs, dangling like spectral curtains, and the floor was uneven, pitted with shallow puddles that reflected the flickering flame. Holmes consulted the map again, holding it close to the lantern. "This passage splits ahead," he said, his voice echoing faintly. "The left branch leads to a storage chamber, likely a decoy. The right should take us toward the vault or whatever lies at the heart of this labyrinth." Watson nodded, his breath visible in the chill air. "And the traps?" The map marked several. "Indeed," Holmes replied, his eyes narrowing. "The order that built this place was not known for hospitality. Stay close and watch your step." They moved forward, Holmes leading with the lantern, held high. The tunnel was oppressively narrow, forcing them to walk single file, their shoulders brushing against the damp walls. The silence was broken only by the drip of water and the occasional skitter of unseen creatures in the dark. Watson's hand hovered near his revolver, his senses heightened by the oppressive atmosphere. After several minutes, the tunnel widened into a small chamber, its ceiling supported by a single, massive beam. The map indicated a trap here, a pressure plate concealed beneath the floor. Holmes paused, studying the ground with meticulous care. He crouched, brushing away dirt to reveal a faint seam in the stone, barely visible in the lantern's glow. "Step." "Only where I step," he instructed, his voice calm but firm. He took a tentative step, testing the floor with his weight, then another. Watson followed, mimicking his movements precisely. They crossed the chamber without incident, but Watson's heart pounded, his imagination conjuring images of collapsing ceilings or hidden blades. The tunnel beyond grew narrower still, the walls closing in until they had to turn sideways to pass. Holmes's lantern cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe against the stone. At one point, the passage dipped sharply, forcing them to crouch. The air grew thicker, carrying a faint metallic tang that made Watson's nose wrinkle. "Holmes," he whispered, "do you smell that?" Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "Iron, likely from old machinery. We're nearing something significant." The tunnel opened into another chamber, this one larger, with a low ceiling and walls lined with crude carvings, symbols matching those on the brass key from the clock. In the center stood a stone pedestal, its surface etched with a spiral pattern. The map marked this as a critical junction, but it offered no further clues. Holmes circled the pedestal, his fingers tracing the carvings. "This is no mere decoration," he murmured. "The spiral corresponds to the serpent symbol on the map, a mechanism perhaps." He pressed his hand against the pedestal's center, and a faint click echoed through the chamber. Watson tensed, expecting a trap, but instead, a section of the wall slid open with a grinding rumble, revealing a hidden passage. Dust billowed outward, and Holmes shielded the lantern, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Well done, Holmes," Watson said, though his voice betrayed his unease. "But I don't like the look of that passage. Too narrow, too dark." "Fear not, Watson," Holmes replied, already moving toward the opening. "The dark is merely the absence of light, and we have both in ample supply." The new passage was indeed narrow, barely wide enough for a single man. The walls were smooth, almost polished, suggesting frequent use in ages past. The air grew colder still, and the metallic scent intensified. After several minutes, they reached a fork where the tunnel split into 3 paths. The map indicated the middle path as the correct one, but Holmes paused, his brow furrowing. "Something is amiss," he said, kneeling to examine the floor. He scraped at the dirt with his knife, revealing a faint outline of a trapdoor. "Clever," he muttered. "The map is accurate, but it omits this. A false floor likely rigged to collapse." Watson peered over his shoulder, his stomach tightening. "Can we avoid it?" Holmes nodded, pointing to a narrow ledge along the wall. "We'll edge past. Press yourself flat and move slowly." They inched along the ledge, their backs against the cold stone, the lantern swinging precariously in Holmes's hand. Below them, the trapdoor loomed, its edges barely visible in the dim light. Watson's foot slipped once, sending a pebble, skittering into the darkness, but he caught himself, his breath ragged. "Steady, Watson," Holmes said, his voice calm as ever. "We're nearly there." They reached the end of the ledge, stepping back onto solid ground with a collective sigh of relief. The tunnel continued, now sloping downward, the air growing heavier with each step. The walls were lined with more carvings, these depicting scenes of robed figures performing rituals around a central vault. Holmes paused to study them, his fingers hovering over the etched lines. "These confirm our suspicions," he said. "The vault was built to protect something of immense value, not gold or jewels, but knowledge, perhaps, or power." The order was meticulous, and their traps suggest they trusted no one. Watson shivered, not entirely from the cold. And Evelyn Ashburn, was she part of this? Holmes's eyes narrowed. She was either their ally or their prisoner. The truth lies ahead. The tunnel ended abruptly at a heavy iron door, its surface engraved with the same occult symbols as the keys. A triple lock dominated its center, each slot shaped to fit the keys they'd collected. Above the locks, a carved inscription read, "Veritas omnia vincit," truth conquers all. The phrase from the journal, Watson said, his voice hushed. Truth unlocks all. Holmes nodded, producing the 3 keys, the brass one from the clock, the silver one from the crypt, and the iron one from the chandelier. He inserted them one by one, each clicking into place with a satisfying thud. "Now the phrase," he said, his voice steady. "Speak it clearly, Watson." Watson cleared his throat, feeling oddly self-conscious in the oppressive silence. Truth unlocks all. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groan, the door began to move, its mechanisms grinding as it swung inward. A rush of stale air greeted them, carrying a faint hum that seemed to vibrate in their bones. Holmes raised the lantern, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The tiered chamber was circular, its walls lined with shelves of ancient books and scrolls, their bindings cracked and faded. In the center stood a pedestal, but it was empty, save for a faint outline where something had once rested. The air was thick with dust, and the hum grew louder. emanating from the walls themselves. Holmes stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. "This is not the vault," he said, his voice tinged with realization. "It's a decoy, a guardian chamber meant to deter intruders." Watson frowned, his hand still on his revolver. "Then where's the real vault?" Before Holmes could answer, a voice echoed through the chamber, a woman's voice, faint but clear, laced with desperation. "Help me, please." Trapped, Watson's blood ran cold. "Holmes, that's—" "Evelyn Ashbourne," Holmes finished, his eyes narrowing. He moved to the pedestal, his fingers searching for hidden mechanisms. A faint click sounded, and a panel in the wall slid open, revealing a small alcove. Inside was a phonograph cylinder, its surface gleaming faintly in the lantern's light. Holmes lifted it carefully, his expression one of intense focus. "This is the source of the whispers," he said. A recording preserved by the chamber's acoustics. Evelyn's voice, calling out across the decades. Watson stared at the cylinder, his mind racing. But why? What was she protecting? Holmes's gaze darkened. "That, Watson, is what we must now uncover. The true vault lies elsewhere, and we are running out of time." They retraced their steps through the tunnels, the cylinder tucked safely in Holmes's satchel. The journey back was no less perilous, with another trap, a series of dart mechanisms nearly catching them off guard. Holmes's quick reflexes saved them, deflecting a dart with his crowbar just as it shot from the wall dot as they emerged into the night air, the manor looming above them. Holmes's expression was grim. "Victor Crane will not stop," he said. "He knows of the cylinder, and he will come for it. We must act swiftly." Watson nodded, his resolve hardening. "Back to Baker Street, then?" "No," Holmes replied, his eyes glinting in the tar. "Moonlight. We return to the manor at dawn. The cylinder is but a piece of the puzzle. The true vault and Evelyn's secret awaits us." The night was still, but the weight of their discovery hung heavy between them. As they made their way back to the manor, the distant cry of a fox echoed through the darkness, a reminder that the labyrinth's secrets were far from fully unraveled. The manor's silhouette loomed against the pre-dawn sky as Holmes and Watson prepared for their return. They had spent the remainder of the night in a small guest room, the phonograph cylinder locked in a sturdy case Holmes had improvised from a cigar box. Sleep had eluded them, their minds too occupied with the implications of their find. Watson had suggested playing the cylinder immediately, but Holmes had demurred, insisting they needed a proper phonograph and a secure location to avoid damaging it at dawn. They descended once more into the tunnels, this time armed with additional tools, a second lantern, a coil of rope, and a small notebook where Holmes had sketched the map's key features. The air was still damp, but the silence felt heavier, as if the labyrinth itself were holding its breath. They navigated the familiar passages with greater confidence, bypassing the pressure plate and the false floor with ease. The iron door remained open, its lock still holding the 3 keys. Holmes paused at the threshold, his eyes scanning the chamber for any signs of disturbance. "No one has been here," he said, his voice low. "But we must remain vigilant. Crane's men are not fools." They moved to the pedestal, where Holmes examined the alcove again. The cylinder had been the only object inside, but the walls bore faint scratches, as if something else had once been stored there. Holmes ran his fingers along the marks, his brow furrowed in thought. "A container, perhaps," he mused. Something small enough to fit here, but heavy enough to leave these marks. A box or a case. Watson peered over his shoulder. 4. The sonic device Evelyn mentioned in her journal? Possibly, Holmes replied, but we need more than speculation. The cylinder will tell us more. They returned to the Manor's library, where Holmes had spotted an old phonograph during their earlier search. It was a dusty, ornate contraption, its horn tarnished but intact. Holmes carefully inserted the cylinder, winding the mechanism with precision. Watson stood by, his revolver at the ready, half expecting an ambush. The phonograph crackled to life, and Evelyn Ashburn's voice filled the room, faint but clear, her words laced with urgency. To whoever finds this, I am Evelyn Ashburn. I write this in the year 1855, hidden from those who would betray me. The vault is not what it seems. It is a lie, a decoy to protect my true work, a device that harnesses sound to shape the world. They seek it, the order of the silent coil, but they cannot be trusted. I have hidden it where none will look, in the heart of the labyrinth beyond. The third gate. Find it and guard it, for it could change everything. The recording ended with a faint sob, followed by silence. Watson's face was pale, his hand trembling slightly on his revolver. Holmes, she sounds terrified. She was, Holmes said, his voice steady but grim. And she was betrayed. The order of the silent coil, likely the same group behind the vault's construction. They wanted her device, and she hid it to keep it from them. Watson frowned. But where is this third gate? The map only showed 2. Holmes's eyes gleamed with sudden realization. The map is incomplete or deliberately misleading. There must be another passage, hidden even from the Order's own records. They returned to the tunnels, this time focusing on the chambers. Walls. Holmes tapped methodically, listening for hollow spots. After nearly an hour, he found it, a section of the wall that sounded different, its echo sharper. He pressed against it, and a faint click revealed another hidden panel, this one leading to a spiral staircase descending deeper into the earth. The staircase was narrow and treacherous, its steps worn smooth by time. The air grew colder, the metallic tang stronger. At the bottom, they found a third iron door, its surface unadorned, save for a single slot for a key they did not possess. Holmes cursed under his breath. A rare lapse in composure. The map lied, he said. There's a fourth key, and we've missed it. Watson's jaw tightened. Crane, he must have it. Holmes nodded, his mind already racing. We returned to London. Crane's auction was a front. He's been hunting this key all along. We must find him before he finds us. The journey back to the surface was silent, each man lost in thought. The Manor's grounds were quiet as they emerged, but the air felt charged, as if the labyrinth itself were watching. Holmes clutched the phonograph cylinder, his resolve unshaken despite the setback. In London, they tracked Crane to a dockside tavern, a den of smugglers and thieves. Disguised as sailors, they slipped inside, blending into the raucous crowd. Crane sat in a corner, his sharp eyes scanning the room, a small iron key dangling from a chain around his neck. Holmes leaned close to Watson, his voice barely audible. We take him now quietly. No bloodshed if we can avoid it. They moved. With practiced ease, Holmes distracting Crane with a spilled drink while Watson slipped behind him, deftly unclasping the chain. Crane's shout of alarm came too late. They were already out the door, the key in hand, pursued by his men through the foggy streets. The chase was relentless, weaving through alleys and over rooftops, but Holmes's knowledge of London's underbelly gave them the edge. They lost their pursuers near the Thames, ducking into a derelict warehouse to catch their breath. Holmes examined the key, its surface etched with the same serpent symbol. "This is it," he said, "the final piece." They returned to the manor under cover of night, the key burning a hole in Holmes's pocket. The tunnels welcomed them once more, their shadows dancing in the lantern's light. At the third door, Holmes inserted the key, and the lock clicked open with a sound like a sigh. Beyond lay another chamber, smaller but more ornate, its walls covered in intricate mosaics depicting sound waves and celestial patterns. In the center stood a wooden chest, its lid carved with the words Veritas Omnia Vincit. Holmes approached it cautiously, his fingers tracing the lock. "Truth unlocks all," he said, and the chest opened with a soft click. Inside was a strange device, a series of brass tubes and crystal resonators connected by delicate wires. It hummed faintly, as if alive. A note in Evelyn's handwriting lay beside it. "Guard this with your life. The world is not ready." Holmes lifted the device, his expression a mix of awe and caution. "This is what Crane wanted," he said. "A sonic weapon capable of manipulating minds through sound. Evelyn was a genius and a guardian." Watson stared at the device, his voice hushed. "What do we do with it?" Holmes's eyes hardened. "We destroy it. No one, not Crane, not the Order, can be trusted with such power." They carried the device to the manor's courtyard, where Holmes dismantled it with surgical precision, smashing the crystals and bending the tubes beyond repair. As dawn broke, the manor seemed to exhale, its oppressive air lifting for the first time. The phonograph cylinder was placed in a secure vault at Baker Street, its secrets safe for now. Holmes and Watson sat by the fire, the weight of their adventure settling over them. "Evelyn's legacy is safe," Watson said, breaking the silence. "But at what cost?" Holmes stared into the flames, his expression unreadable. "The cost of truth, Watson. Always heavy, but always worth paying." The manor stood silent, its labyrinth sealed, its whispers stilled. But in the quiet of Baker Street, Holmes knew the world was never truly at rest, and neither was he. Chapter 8. The Ghost of Evelyn Ashburn. The air in the manor was thick with the scent of old wood and damp stone as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood in the hidden chamber beneath the Ashbourne estate. The flickering light of their lanterns cast long, wavering shadows across the walls, illuminating the pedestal at the room's center. The absence of a vault door was a puzzle in itself, and the faint, eerie whisper they'd heard moments before, Evelyn Ashburn's voice pleading for release, hung in the air like a ghost. Holmes's sharp eyes darted across the chamber, his mind racing to piece together the clues that had led them here. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice low and steady, "this is no ordinary vault. The whispers, the keys, the phrase, they all point to something more intricate than a mere lockbox. We are dealing with a deception of remarkable ingenuity." Watson, still catching his breath from the narrow escape through the tunnels, adjusted his grip on the lantern. "A deception? You mean to say the vault doesn't exist?" "Not in the way we imagined," Holmes replied, stepping closer to the pedestal. His fingers traced the smooth marble surface, searching for any hidden mechanism. The vault is a metaphor, a construct designed to obscure the true secret. Evelyn Ashburn's plea suggests something preserved, something recorded. We must look beyond the physical. Watson frowned, his practical mind grappling with the abstract. But the keys, Holmes, the 3 keys, and the phrase "truth unlocks all." They opened this chamber, didn't they? Indeed, Holmes said, his gaze narrowing. But this chamber is not the end. It is a stage, a prelude to the true revelation. The symbols on the keys, the acoustic anomalies of the whispers, there is a pattern here, Watson, and I am close to grasping it. Holmes knelt beside the pedestal, his keen eyes scanning for irregularities. His fingers brushed against a faint seam in the marble, barely perceptible to the touch. With a gentle press, a soft click echoed in the chamber, and a small panel slid open, revealing a cylindrical object wrapped in faded cloth. Holmes carefully unwrapped it, revealing a phonograph cylinder, its wax surface etched with fine grooves. The label, written in a delicate hand, read, "Evelyn Ashburn, 1865. A phonograph cylinder," Watson said, his voice tinged with awe. "This is what the vault was hiding. A recording?" Holmes's lips curled into a faint smile. "Not just any recording, Watson. This is the voice of Evelyn Ashburn herself, preserved for decades. The whispers we heard were no supernatural phenomenon. They were the echoes of this cylinder, amplified by the manor's unique acoustics. The vault's design must channel sound in a way that projects her words at midnight when the manor is still." Watson leaned closer, peering at the cylinder. But why go to such lengths to hide a recording? What could she have said that required such secrecy? Holmes's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "That, my dear Watson, is what we are about to discover. But we cannot play it here. We need a phonograph, and we must proceed with caution. If my suspicions are correct, this cylinder holds the key to the Ashburn legacy and the reason why Victor Crane and his ilk are so desperate to claim it. They retraced their steps through the labyrinthine tunnels, the weight of the cylinder in Holmes's pocket a constant reminder of the stakes. The manor above was silent as they emerged into the grand hall, the storm that had trapped them earlier. Now a distant rumble. Holmes led the way to the library, where he recalled seeing an old phonograph among Lord Ashburn's collection of curiosities. The device, though dusty, was intact, its brass horn gleaming faintly in the lantern light. Holmes carefully placed the cylinder onto the phonograph's spindle, winding the crank with deliberate precision. "Stand back, Watson," he said. "We are about to hear the voice of a woman who has been silent for over 30 years. The needle touched the cylinder, and after a moment of static, a woman's voice filled the room clear, measured, and tinged with urgency. It was Evelyn Ashburn, her words carrying the weight of a confession. "If you are hearing this, you have unlocked the truth I sought to protect. My name is Evelyn Ashburn, and I am not dead, though by now the world believes me to be. I have chosen to vanish, to shield a discovery that could alter the course of human thought. In this manner, I perfected a device, a sonic apparatus capable of manipulating sound waves to influence the mind. It is a tool of immense power, and in the wrong hands, a weapon. I entrusted its secrets to the Order of the Saffron Veil, but I was betrayed. My lover, a member of the Order, sought to sell my invention to foreign powers. I could not allow that. I hid the device, and with it, my life. The vault is a lie, a riddle to protect this truth. If you seek the device, follow the path of the taff. Saffron thread. But beware those who covet its power will stop at nothing. The recording ended with a faint click, leaving the library in silence. Watson's face was pale, his mind reeling. A sonic device? Capable of manipulating minds? Holmes, this is extraordinary and dangerous. Holmes's expression was grim. Extraordinary, yes, but also a magnet for greed. Victor Crane's pursuit of the vault was never about gold or jewels. It was about this device. Evelyn's invention could be used to sway crowds, control leaders, or worse. We must find it before Crane does. Watson nodded, though his unease was palpable. But where do we begin? The saffron thread. What does that mean? Holmes paced the library, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The Order of the Saffron Veil was a secretive group rumored to have dabbled in esoteric sciences. The saffron thread likely refers to a trail they left, a clue hidden in plain sight. We must search the manor for anything marked with saffron. Perhaps a literal thread or a symbolic one. Their search began in earnest, the two men combing through the manor's countless rooms. Watson checked the servants' quarters, finding nothing but dusty linens, while Holmes scoured the upper floors. In a neglected parlor, he noticed a tapestry depicting a medieval scene, its colors faded except for a single vibrant thread of saffron yellow woven into the border. He tugged at it gently, and a small pouch fell from the tapestry's hem, containing a folded note. The note, written in Evelyn's hand, read, "The thread leads to the heart of the manor where the light bends and the truth sings." Holmes's pulse quickened. "The heart of the manor," he murmured. "The conservatory, its glass roof bends light, and its acoustics are remarkable. Come, Watson." They hurried to the conservatory, a glass-domed room filled with wilted plants and forgotten statues. The moonlight streamed through the panes, casting prismatic patterns on the floor. Holmes followed the patterns, his eyes tracing a path to a central statue of a muse holding a lyre. At its base, he found a hidden compartment, revealed by pressing a carved note on the lyre. Inside was a small, intricate device, a brass and crystal apparatus, its design unlike anything Watson had ever seen. "This must be it," Watson said. His voice hushed. Evelyn's sonic device. Holmes examined it closely, noting the delicate wiring and crystal resonators. "A marvel of engineering," he said. "It likely uses harmonic frequencies to stimulate the brain, inducing suggestibility. But we cannot test it here, not without risking ourselves." Before they could discuss further, the conservatory doors burst open, and three masked figures stormed in, their knives glinting in the moonlight. Victor Crane's men, no doubt, had tracked them. Holmes reacted swiftly, shoving Watson behind a statue as he drew his revolver. "Stay down, Watson," Holmes shouted, firing a warning shot that sent the intruders scrambling for cover. The conservatory erupted into chaos, glass shattering as bullets flew. Watson, ever the soldier, grabbed a nearby garden tool and struck one of the assailants, knocking him unconscious. Holmes, with his uncanny precision, disarmed another with a well-aimed shot to the hand. The third assailant lunged at Holmes, but Watson tackled him, pinning him to the ground. "Who sent you?" Watson demanded, his voice fierce. The man spat, refusing to answer. But Holmes noticed a familiar medallion around his neck, the same occult symbols as the keys. "Crane's men," Holmes said, binding the assailants, wrists with a cord from the curtains. But Crane himself is not here. He's too clever to risk exposure. With the intruders subdued, Holmes and Watson secured the sonic device and the phonograph cylinder, knowing they had to act quickly. Holmes sent a coded message to Inspector Lestrade at Scotland Yard, alerting him to the captured men and urging immediate action against Crane's network. The manor, once a place of whispers, was now a battleground, and Holmes knew the fight was far from over. They retreated to a safer room, barricading the door as they planned their next move. Holmes examined the sonic device again, his mind racing. "Evelyn's invention is too dangerous to remain intact," he said. "But destroying it outright would erase her legacy. We must find a way to preserve her work while ensuring it cannot be misused." Watson nodded, though his concern was evident. "And Crane, he's still out there, Holmes. He won't stop until he gets what he wants." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Then we shall draw him out, Watson. We have the device, the cylinder, and the advantage. Crane will come to us, and when he does, we will be ready." The night stretched on, the manor's silence broken only by the occasional creak of its ancient timbers. Holmes and Watson kept watch, the sonic device hidden in a locked case. Holmes's mind was a storm of calculations, piecing together Crane's likely moves. He suspected the antiquarian they'd met earlier was a weak link someone Crane might contact for updates. A plan began to form. They would use the antiquarian as bait. Luring Crane into a trap. At dawn, they left the manor, taking the device and cylinder to a safe house in London. Holmes contacted the antiquarian, posing as a buyer interested in rare artifacts. The nervous man agreed to meet, unaware that Holmes had already alerted Lestrade to monitor the exchange. The safe house, a nondescript flat in Whitechapel, became their base as they prepared for the confrontation. The antiquarian arrived at noon, his eyes darting nervously. I don't know much," he stammered, clutching a satchel. "Crane asked me to find buyers for something big, something scientific. He didn't say what." Holmes leaned forward, his voice calm but commanding. "And where is Crane now?" The antiquarian hesitated, then whispered, "He's at a warehouse in Limehouse. Tonight he's meeting someone, a foreign agent, I think." Holmes exchanged a glance with Watson. "Thank you," he said, dismissing the man. "You've been most helpful." As the antiquarian left, Holmes turned to Watson. "Limehouse, Watson. That's where we'll find Crane and the end of this case." They spent the afternoon preparing, arming themselves, and coordinating with Lestrade. The warehouse in Limehouse was a derelict structure, its windows boarded and its walls blackened by soot. Under cover of dusk, Holmes and Watson approached, their steps silent on the cobbled street. They slipped inside through a broken window, finding a dimly lit interior filled with crates and machinery. At the center of the warehouse, Victor Crane stood beside a table, inspecting a partially assembled device that resembled Evelyn's invention. Two men in foreign military uniforms stood nearby, their expressions eager. Holmes signaled to Watson, and they crept closer, hiding behind a stack of crates. Crane's voice was sharp as he addressed the foreigners. "This device will give your government unparalleled influence. Imagine controlling entire populations with a single frequency." The Ashbourne woman was a genius, but she lacked vision. "I do not." Holmes stepped into the light, his revolver trained on Crane. "Your vision ends here, Crane," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. Step away from the device. Crane's eyes widened, but he recovered quickly, a smirk spreading across his face. Holmes, I should have known you'd meddle. But you're too late. The deal is done. Watson emerged, his own weapon drawn. Not quite, he said. Scotland Yard is outside. You're surrounded. Crane's smirk faltered as the sound of boots echoed from the warehouse entrance. Lestrade and his men stormed in, their lanterns illuminating the scene. Crane's accomplices raised their hands, but Crane lunged for the device, attempting to activate it. Holmes was faster, tackling him to the ground and wrenching the device from his grasp. In the chaos, one of the crates caught fire, likely from a stray spark. The flames spread quickly, licking at the wooden beams. Holmes grabbed the sonic device and the cylinder, shoving them into Watson's arms. "Get these out," he shouted, dragging Crane toward the exit. They stumbled into the night air as the warehouse erupted in flames, the roar of the fire drowning out Crane's curses. Lestrade's men apprehended the foreign agents, while Crane was handcuffed, his plans in ruins. Holmes watched the warehouse burn, ensuring Evelyn's device was destroyed in the blaze. Back at Baker Street, Holmes and Watson sat by the fire, the phonograph cylinder on the table between them. "Evelyn's legacy is safe," Holmes said, his voice quiet. "Her invention was too dangerous for this world, but her brilliance deserves to be remembered." Watson nodded, sipping his brandy. "And Crane?" "Behind bars where he belongs," Holmes replied. "But men like him are never alone. The Order of the Saffron Veil may still have members watching, waiting. We must remain vigilant." The fire crackled, and Holmes leaned back, his mind already turning to the next mystery. The whispers of the Ashburn Manor were silent at last, but the echoes of Evelyn's genius lingered, a reminder of the thin line between discovery and destruction. Chapter 9. The Sound of Betrayal. Fog hung heavy over London's docks, a gray shroud that muffled the clatter of cranes and the shouts of dockworkers. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood at the edge of a narrow alley, their breath visible in the chill night air. Holmes's sharp eyes scanned the derelict warehouse across the street, its rusted iron walls and broken windows barely discernible through the mist. The faint hum of machinery seeped from within, a discordant note in the otherwise quiet night. Holmes adjusted his scarf, his lean frame taut with anticipation. "We're close." "Watson," he murmured, his voice low but steady. "Crane's operation is inside. The sonic device, Evelyn's invention, is there, and he's preparing to sell it to the highest bidder. We must act swiftly." Watson, clutching his service revolver beneath his coat, nodded grimly. "You're certain this is the place? It looks abandoned." "Precisely why it's perfect for Crane's purposes," Holmes replied, his gaze fixed on a faint light flickering through a cracked window. A derelict warehouse, ignored by the authorities, yet close to the docks for a quick escape. "The hum you hear, that's no ordinary machine. It's Evelyn's sonic device, or a crude imitation of it. Their plan was simple but perilous: infiltrate the warehouse, confirm the device's presence, and sabotage it before Victor Crane could deliver it to his foreign buyer. Holmes had deduced Crane's location from the map stolen at the black market auction, cross-referencing it with shipping manifests and a tip from his network of informants. The antiquarian's nervous confession had sealed Crane's fate, pointing Holmes to this forgotten corner of the city. But time was short. Crane's deal was set for tonight, and the buyer, rumored to be a Prussian agent, would not wait. Holmes led the way, moving like a shadow across the cobbled street. Watson followed, his steps heavier but resolute. They slipped through a side door, its hinges groaning softly. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of rusted beams and stacked crates, the air thick with the scent of oil and damp wood. A faint glow emanated from the far end, where a makeshift platform held a complex apparatus, a tangle of wires, brass tubes and glass bulbs pulsing with a low, rhythmic hum. Two burly men stood guard, their faces obscured by the dim light. Holmes motioned for Watson to stay low, and they crept behind a stack of crates. From their vantage point, they could see Victor Crane, a wiry man with a sharp jaw and restless eyes, adjusting dials on the device. Beside him stood a tall figure in a dark overcoat, his face half hidden by a scarf. The Prussian, Holmes presumed. This device, Crane was saying, his voice carrying a salesman's confidence, can bend sound to your will. Imagine it, a weapon that disorients, controls, even breaks a man's mind without a shot fired. Evelyn Ashburn was a genius, but she lacked vision. I've refined her work, made it practical. The Prussian leaned closer, his voice clipped. And precise. And it's stable? Your last demonstration failed spectacularly. Crane's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. A minor setback. Tonight you'll see its full potential. Name your target troops, diplomats, entire crowds. This machine can turn their own thoughts against them. Watson whispered. Holmes, if that thing works as he claims, it's monstrous. We can't let it leave this warehouse. Holmes's eyes gleamed with resolve. Nor shall it, but we need a closer look. Follow my lead. They edged along the crates, moving silently, toward the platform. Holmes's mind raced, cataloging every detail. The device's exposed wiring, the glass bulbs glowing faintly, the guards' predictable patrol patterns. He noted a small control box at the device's base, its levers and switches likely key to its operation. If he could disable it without raising the alarm, they might escape before Crane's men noticed Dot as they neared the platform. A guard turned, his eyes narrowing. Holmes froze, pressing himself against a crate. Watson held his breath, his hand tightening on his revolver. The guard hesitated, then resumed his patrol, muttering about the cold. Holmes exhaled softly, signaling Watson to move. They reached the platform's edge, crouching beneath a tarp-covered crate. Holmes peered at the device, its design both elegant and sinister. The brass tubes formed a lattice, amplifying sound. Waves through a series of resonators, while the glass bulbs seemed to stabilize the output. Evelyn's journal had described the theory. Sound waves tuned to specific frequencies could disrupt cognitive functions, inducing confusion or even hypnosis. Crane's modifications, however, appeared crude, likely causing unpredictable effects. Holmes whispered, "The control box is our target. If I can overload the circuits, the device will fail permanently." Watson nodded, but his expression was tense. "And the guards?" "There are at least 4 now, and Crane's not alone." "Leave that to me," Holmes said, his voice calm but firm. "When I signal, create a diversion, something loud but not lethal." Watson grinned faintly. "I've got just the thing." Holmes crept toward the control box, his movements precise and silent. He reached into his coat, producing a small tool, a modified screwdriver with a magnetized tip. The control box was locked, but the mechanism was simple, and Holmes had it open in seconds. Inside, a tangle of wires connected to a central fuse, the device's heart. He traced the circuits, identifying the power source, a small dynamo humming softly. Disrupting it would cause a feedback loop, frying the entire system. As Holmes worked, Watson slipped away, positioning himself near a stack of barrels. He waited for Holmes's signal, a subtle flick of his hand, then acted. With a swift kick, Watson toppled a barrel, sending it crashing to the floor. The noise echoed through the warehouse, drawing the guards' attention. "What the devil?" one shouted, rushing toward the sound. Crane spun around, his eyes darting. "Check it." "Now," he barked, his hand reaching for a pistol at his belt. Holmes seized the moment, twisting two wires together and flipping a switch. The dynamo whined, its pitch rising sharply. Sparks flew from the control box, and the glass bulbs flickered wildly. The Prussian cursed, stepping back as the hum became a piercing screech. "Stop him!" Crane shouted, spotting Holmes. But it was too late. The device shuddered, smoke rising from its core. Holmes yanked the fuse free, and the bulbs shattered, sending glass shards across the platform. The screech died, replaced by an eerie silence. Chaos erupted. The guards charged toward Holmes, but Watson fired a warning shot into the air, freezing them in their tracks. "Stay back," Watson bellowed, his revolver steady. The Prussian lunged for Crane, shouting in German, but Crane shoved him aside. Bolting for a side exit, Holmes sprinted after him, his long legs closing the distance. "Watson, the buyer," he called over his shoulder. Watson tackled the Prussian, pinning him to the ground as the guards hesitated, unsure whether to fight or flee. Crane reached the exit, but Holmes was faster. He grabbed Crane's arm, twisting it behind his back. "You're finished, Crane," Holmes said, his voice cold. "The device is destroyed, and Scotland Yard is on its way." Crane snarled, struggling. "You think this ends with me? Others want her invention. You'll never stop them all." Holmes tightened his grip. "Perhaps. But you'll not profit from it tonight." Minutes later, the warehouse was surrounded by constables, alerted by a telegram Holmes had sent earlier. Inspector Lestrade, ever reliable, took Crane and the Prussian into custody. The guards surrendered without a fight, their loyalty to Crane evaporating in the face of arrest. As the police secured the scene, Holmes examined the wreckage of the sonic device. Its core was irreparable, the delicate mechanisms reduced to twisted metal and glass. Evelyn's genius, he thought, was safe for now, but Crane's words lingered. Others would seek her invention, drawn by its potential for control. Watson joined him, brushing dirt from his coat. "That was too close, Holmes." "If that device had worked—" "It didn't," Holmes interrupted, his tone sharp but softening. "Thanks to you, old friend. Your diversion was impeccable." Watson chuckled. "I've had practice. But what now?" "The device is gone, but Crane's buyer wasn't working alone." Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind already racing ahead. "We return to Baker Street. Evelyn's journal may hold more clues, names, places, others who knew of her work. This isn't over." They stepped into the fog, the warehouse fading behind them. Holmes's thoughts turned to Evelyn Ashburn, a woman whose brilliance had outlived her, preserved in whispers and secrets. He felt a pang of admiration, tempered by caution. Her invention, even destroyed, was a reminder of the fine line between genius and danger. Back at 221B Baker Street, Holmes sat by the fire, the journal open before him. Watson poured 2 brandies, handing one to his friend. "To a case, nearly." "Solved," Watson said, raising his glass. Holmes didn't drink. His eyes were fixed on the journal's final page, where a single line stood out: "The sound of truth is louder than any lie." He closed the book, his expression unreadable. "Nearly." "Solved, Watson," he said softly, "but not quite. Tomorrow we dig deeper." The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls and outside. The fog swallowed London whole. The next morning, Holmes was up before dawn, his violin silent but his mind a symphony of deduction. He pored over Evelyn's journal, cross-referencing names and dates with his vast mental archive. Watson, bleary-eyed but loyal, brewed coffee and listened as Holmes outlined their next steps. "Crane mentioned others," Holmes said, pacing the room. "He's a small player, Watson a middleman. The real threat lies with those who funded him, who knew enough to seek Evelyn's device. The Prussian was a clue, but not the mastermind." Watson frowned. "How do we find them?" "The journal's cryptic, and Crane's not talking." Holmes smiled thinly. "He doesn't need to." "The journal mentions a Council of Echoes, a group within the secret society Evelyn joined. They guarded her work, but some betrayed her. If we find their meeting place, we find our answers." The journal's final entries hinted at a location: an old chapel in Whitechapel, abandoned since the Great Fire. Holmes cross-checked it with city records, confirming its existence. "It's a risk," he admitted, "but we have no choice. If the council still exists, they'll be watching for us." By noon, they were in Whitechapel, the chapel's crumbling spire looming through the smog. The streets buzzed with vendors and urchins, but the chapel itself was eerily quiet. Its doors were boarded, but Holmes found a loose plank, and they slipped inside. The interior was a ruined pews overturned, stained glass shattered. But beneath the altar, Holmes found a trapdoor, its edges worn from use. He lifted it, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Watson lit a lantern, and they descended. The air growing colder with each step dot at the bottom, they found a circular chamber, its walls carved with the same occult symbols as the keys. A stone table stood at the center, scattered with papers, and a single photograph: Evelyn Ashburn, young and defiant, standing beside a man whose face was scratched out. Holmes examined the paper's letters, diagrams, plans for the sonic device. This was their sanctum, he said. The council planned everything here, but look. He held up a letter, its ink fresh. It's dated last week. They're still active. Watson's eyes widened. Then we're not alone. As if? On cue, footsteps echoed above. Holmes doused the lantern, and they pressed against the wall. 3 figures descended, cloaked and masked, their voices low. "Crane failed," one said, his tone bitter. "But the device's plans are safe. We move to Paris tomorrow." Holmes signaled Watson to stay silent. He listened, memorizing every word. The council discussed their next steps: a new buyer, a new city, a new plan to rebuild Evelyn's device. When they left, Holmes and Watson emerged, their faces grim. "We can't follow them to Paris," Watson said. "Not without more evidence," Holmes nodded. "We don't need to. These papers are enough to expose them. I'll send them to Lestrade with instructions to alert Interpol. The council won't escape." They returned to Baker Street, the papers safely tucked in Holmes's coat. He spent the night drafting a detailed report, his pen scratching furiously. Watson watched, marveling at his friend's relentless drive. By morning, the report was sent, and Holmes leaned back in his chair, exhausted but satisfied. "Evelyn's legacy is safe, Watson," he said. "Her device, her secrets, they'll remain buried." Watson raised an eyebrow. "Until the next madman tries to unearth them?" Holmes's smile was faint but genuine. "Then we'll be ready." The case of the Whispering Vault was closed, but Holmes knew the world was full of whisper secrets waiting to be uncovered. For now, he lit his pipe, the smoke curling toward the ceiling, and let the silence settle. Chapter 10. The silence of the vault. The fog clung to London streets like a conspirator's cloak as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stepped from their hansom cab onto the cobblestones outside Ashbourne Manor. The night was heavy, the air thick with the promise of rain, and the manor loomed before them, its silhouette jagged against the bruised sky. The case of the Whispering Vault had drawn to a close, or so it seemed yet. Holmes's sharp eyes gleamed with the intensity of a man who sensed one final thread dangling in the tapestry of mystery. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice low, "we must ensure no remnant of Evelyn Ashburn's invention survives. Crane's defeat was satisfying, but men like him are rarely alone in their ambitions. The manor holds secrets yet." Watson adjusted his coat, his breath visible in the chill. "You suspect more trouble?" "After all, we've been through tunnels, traps, and that infernal device. I'd hoped for a quiet evening." Holmes's lips twitched in a rare half-smile. "Quiet evenings are for men with less curious minds. Come, let us finish this." The manor's iron gates creaked as they entered, the ground silent save for the distant hoot of an owl. Lord Ashburn awaited them at the entrance, his gaunt frame illuminated by a single lantern. His eyes, shadowed with fatigue, brightened at their arrival. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he greeted, his voice tremulous. "I cannot thank you enough. The whispers have ceased, and yet I fear the manor's curse lingers in my heart." "There are no curses, Lord Ashburn," Holmes replied, stepping into the dimly lit foyer. "Only truths obscured by time. We are here to ensure those truths remain buried safely." The trio moved through the manor's cavernous halls, their footsteps echoing off the ancient stone. Holmes's gaze swept over every detail, the faded tapestries, the dust-laden portraits, the faint scratches on the floorboards where furniture had been moved. Watson, ever vigilant, kept a hand near his revolver, though he hoped it would not be needed. The memory of Victor Crane's men storming the manor only days ago lingered like a bruise. Their destination was the underground tunnels, the labyrinth, where Holmes and Watson had uncovered Evelyn Ashburn's recorded confession and the truth of the so-called vault. The sonic device, a marvel of engineering capable of manipulating sound waves to influence the mind, had been destroyed in the warehouse confrontation, but Holmes's methodical nature demanded certainty. "We must confirm no blueprints, no fragments, no whispers of that device remain," he had told Watson earlier. A single oversight could resurrect this danger. They descended a narrow staircase hidden behind a false panel in the library, the air growing colder and damper. With each step, Lord Ashburn carried a second lantern, its light casting long shadows that danced like specters. The tunnels were a maze of stone and earth, their walls etched with the same occult symbols Holmes had noted on the keys. The air was stale, heavy, with the scent of mold and time. "These tunnels," Lord Ashburn murmured, "were built by my ancestors, or so I was told. I never knew their extent until you uncovered them." Holmes nodded, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Your ancestors were cautious, perhaps paranoid. This network was designed to protect something or to hide it. Evelyn's invention was no mere trinket. It was a weapon, and those who built these passages knew its value. They reached this sealed door from their previous venture, its surface still bearing the marks of their entry." Holmes knelt, inspecting the stonework. "No signs of tampering since we left," he said, running a finger along the edge. "Good, but we must go deeper," Watson frowned. "Deeper? I thought we'd found everything. The chamber, the phonograph, cylinder, Evelyn's confession." Holmes's eyes glinted in the lantern light. "The cylinder was a revelation, Watson, but it was also a distraction. Evelyn was cleverer than that. A woman who could design such a device would not leave its secrets so easily exposed. There is another chamber, or I am much mistaken." He pressed his hands against the walls, tapping lightly, listening for hollow spaces. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the faint drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Then a subtle shift in tone, a dull thud where a sharper echo should have been. Holmes pressed harder, and a section of the wall groaned, revealing a narrow passage barely wide. "Enough for a man to pass. Remarkable," Watson breathed, peering into the gloom. "How did you know?" "Evelyn's journal," Holmes replied, stepping into the passage. "Her code spoke of layers within layers, a phrase I initially took as metaphor, but her mind was literal when it came to protection. This manor is a puzzle box, and we've only opened the first layer." The passage descended sharply, the air growing colder still. The walls were rougher here, carved with less care, as if dug in haste. Holmes led the way, his lantern casting a pale glow on symbols that grew stranger spirals, eyes, and what looked like musical notes etched in stone. Watson's unease grew, his hand tightening on his revolver. "Holmes," he said quietly, "these symbols, they're not like the others. They feel wrong." "Superstition, Watson." Holmes's tone was teasing, but his eyes were serious. "They are symbols of the Order of the Silent Chorus, the society Evelyn was entangled with. They believed sound could shape reality, a belief her device proved all too real. These markings are likely warnings or instructions for the initiated." Lord Ashburn's voice trembled. "My cousin. She was part of this madness." "Not madness," Holmes corrected. "Genius misdirected. Evelyn sought to protect her work, but she underestimated the greed it would inspire." The passage opened into a small, circular chamber, its walls lined with shelves of dusty tomes and strange mechanical contraptions, gears, wires, and glass tubes that glinted in the lantern light. At the center stood a stone pedestal, empty save for a single sheet of parchment yellowed with age. Holmes approached it, his fingers brushing the surface as he read aloud. "To those who seek the voice unbound, beware the cost of what is found. The key is silence, the lock is will. Speak not, lest the truth you kill." Watson shivered. "Another riddle?" "A warning," Holmes said. "Evelyn's final safeguard. This chamber is the true heart of the vault, not a physical lock, but a repository of knowledge. These books, these devices, They are the blueprints of her work, or fragments of it. He examined the shelves, pulling down a leather-bound volume. Its pages were filled with diagrams of sound waves, mathematical equations, and notes in Evelyn's precise hand. "This is her true legacy," Holmes said. "Not the device itself, but the knowledge to recreate it." Dangerous in the wrong hands. Lord Ashburn's face paled. "Then we must destroy it, all of it." Holmes hesitated, his fingers lingering on the book. "Knowledge is not the enemy, Lord Ashburn. Ignorance is. But you are right, its potential for harm is too great. We will take these to Baker Street, where I can study them safely. Then they will be burned." Watson raised an eyebrow. "You preserve knowledge only to destroy it. That's unlike you, Holmes." Holmes's expression was unreadable. "There are truths too heavy for the world, Watson. Evelyn understood that. So must we." They gathered the books and devices, wrapping them in oilcloth to protect against the damp. As they prepared to leave, a faint sound stopped them, a low hum, like the vibration of a tuning fork. Holmes froze, his head tilted. "Do you hear that?" Watson strained his ears. "The whispers again?" "No," Holmes said, his voice sharp. "Something else. A resonance, mechanical in origin. Stay here." He moved to the chamber's far wall, pressing his ear against the stone. The hum grew louder, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Holmes's fingers traced a seam, and with a sudden click, a panel slid open, revealing a small alcove. Inside was a brass cylinder identical to the phonograph they had found before, but smaller, its surface etched with the same symbols as the keys. "Another recording," Holmes said, lifting it carefully. Evelyn was thorough. They returned to the Manor's library, where Holmes set up a phonograph he had brought from Baker Street. He wound the mechanism and placed the cylinder, and Evelyn's voice filled the room, crackling but clear. "If you hear this, you have found my final secret. The device is gone, but its echoes remain. I beg you, do not seek to rebuild it. The silent chorus betrayed me, and their greed will betray you. Let my work die with me." The recording ended with a soft click, and silence fell. Lord Ashburn's eyes were wet. She was trying to protect us all. Holmes nodded, and she succeeded in her way. But we must finish what she began. They spent the next hours cataloging the chamber's contents, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Holmes's meticulous nature left no corner unchecked, no page unturned. By dawn, they had sealed the tunnels, collapsing the entrance with carefully placed explosives, a task Holmes handled with the precision of a surgeon. The Manor shook briefly, dust cascading from the rafters, but the structure held. Lord Ashburn insisted they stay for breakfast, a simple meal of tea and toast served in the dining hall. As they ate, he revealed a final truth. "I am Evelyn's distant cousin, as you know," he said, his voice steady for the first time. "But I knew her as a child. She was brilliant even then. I want to restore the Ashburn name to honor her memory." Holmes sipped his tea, his eyes thoughtful. "A noble goal, but a private one. Her legacy is best preserved in silence, not fanfare. Donate her journal to the British Museum, anonymized. Let her story inspire, but not tempt." Lord Ashburn nodded. "You're right, Mr. Holmes. I'll see it done." As they left the Manor, the fog had lifted, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. Watson felt a weight lift from his shoulders, though the case's strangeness lingered in his mind. "Holmes," he said as they boarded there. "Cab, do you think we've truly heard the last of this?" Holmes leaned back, lighting his pipe. "The vault is silent, Watson. That is enough for now. But the world is full of whispers, and we shall be ready when they call." Back at 221B Baker Street, Holmes placed the oilcloth bundle in a locked safe, promising to study it before its destruction. Watson, exhausted, sank into his armchair, penning the final notes of the case in his journal. The manor was quiet, its secrets buried, and yet he could not shake the feeling that Evelyn's genius, like Holmes's own, would echo through time. The case of the Whispering Vault was closed, but as Holmes gazed out the window, his violin in hand, Watson knew another mystery would soon draw them into the fog once more.